Hey everyone, welcome to the first video in the color theory series, color theory, color concepts. In this video, I'm going to go over just a crap ton of color vocabulary and what those vocabulary words mean. And in future videos, I'm going to help you guys figure out color schemes for your design projects and how to mix colors more efficiently using fewer tubes of paint, because paint can get really expensive. Right? Just a little bit of channel business before we get started. I've been receiving more requests for captions and translations, and long story short, I don't have time to type all that up. And obviously, I don't know a lot of different languages. And I know that there are people and programs and services that you can hire to do those sorts of things, right? And I don't make a ton of money on my channel. I don't have sponsors. I have some AdSense dollars. So I have set up a donate button on my channel main page. 100% of that donate money is gonna go to hiring someone to provide captions, and then again after that translations for all of my videos. So if you are able and interested in helping me out, go hit my channel main page, look to the right, there should be a blue button. And if you can't, that's totally fine. I was the broke kid in college. I know what it's like. Art supplies are expensive. So yeah, no skin off. How does that saying go? I don't know. Sometimes I don't understand American idioms. Okay? But anyway, don't worry about it if you can't. If you really want to help, you can spread the word on that's what I'm doing with that donate button, that I'm trying to get captions for my channel. So that's also helpful. Back to color theory. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about is color modes. You may have seen this in Photoshop where, the program asks you what color mode you want to use, CMYK or RGB or grayscale. Okay, number one, I never use grayscale because even if I'm doing a black and white something, I want to be able to choose the undertones for the grays, okay? I like manipulating cool grays and warm grays and things like that, and you can't do that with a completely stripped grayscale document, okay? Number two, CMYK versus RGB. When do you use those? What are those for? What do those letters mean, okay? CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, black. K is for black. And those are the four colors that your printer takes. Okay, if you buy color cartridges for your printer, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And CMYK color mode is for anything where it's going to be a physical, tangible thing. Okay, you are photoshopping a photo or illustrations and you're going to print them onto paper. Okay, CMYK color mode is also for mixing paints because you're mixing pigments and putting them on paper. So when we talk about paint mixing, I'm going to show you the CMYK method. And I know a lot of us grew up with the red, yellow, blue. Those are our primary colors, and that's how you mix all the colors. Okay, that is a big fat lie. It is a conspiracy, and no, I'm kidding. It's not a conspiracy, but it is inaccurate and inefficient. I'm going to show you the CMYK way in the paint mixing video. RGB stands for red, green, and blue, and that is used for light. Okay, so projections that will go, from a projector and projected to a wall or a screen, websites predominantly. Okay, so if you're designing websites, that's all I can think of. Okay, so stuff that's light, stuff that's going to be on a screen, not stuff that's printed, on a piece of paper. Next, every color is defined by these three things. VST, value, saturation, and temperature. All right? So first, value. Value means the lightness or the darkness of a color. All right? And I have all of these grays, okay? And have you heard of a grayscale or a value scale? It shows the lightness and the darkness of colors. This is the Prismacolor Warm Gray set. Here's the 10%. You know, here's the 20%. And it gets darker and darker. These are your values, right? And colors also have values. Like, why is this marker so dirty? Let's reject that because it's all dirty. I'm gonna put this away because, all right. So we have this value, and then we have this value, right? It's much lighter, right? It's that same kind of yellow-orange color, but it's much lighter. So the lightness or the darkness of a color. Here's a color wheel. I use color wheels in class to teach concepts. I bought these on Amazon, this one and this one, and I'll drop the links if you are interested in purchasing these for your own education. But you see here where they have the values, okay, 100% white to 100% black. And each color has a value, okay? When you look at this yellow-orange, okay, what value is it? Okay, which percentage gray does it match up with? Okay. So the easiest way to do that is to kind of swivel this around and look down and kind of squint your eyes, okay? I love teaching this in class because all my students make ridiculous faces. Okay, and if it is a similar value or the correct value match, then this line should start blurring when you start squinting your eyes. See, these two, their values don't match at all. So no matter how much you squint, you see that separation between the yellow-orange and this gray. But this one, that one is pretty close. So the line gets a little blurrier. That one is actually a better value match. And so that line gets super blurry, right? So every color has a value. It's either a light color, medium color, or dark color, right? And then you have saturation. Saturation is the intensity of a color, the brightness of a color, not the lightness, okay? Value is about lightness and darkness. Saturation is about how full of chroma it is, how saturated it is. You have a color like this and it is orange, okay? You can keep adding orange to that. It's not gonna get much oranger. This is goldenrod. This is a nice color I like to use for kind of dirty blonde looks when I'm illustrating. And if you add more orange to that, it'll get oranger and oranger, okay? It is not very saturated, so you can add more orange and it'll get oranger. See? Okay, and you create a new color. You just add orange to orange, it's just gonna stay orange, right? So saturation, brightness, purity, intensity, not lightness. Okay? And then temperature, okay? So we have cool colors and we have warm colors. For those of you following along at home, do you know what the coolest color is? It's blue, okay? Blue is the coolest color because there's nothing you can add to blue that will make it cooler. Okay? If you have violet, you can add blue to it and it'll be cooler. If you add more red to it, it'll become warmer. Okay? Green, you can add blue to it and make it cooler. If you add its next neighbor, yellow, to it, it'll be a warmer green. See, that's a blue is the coolest color, and the warmest color is orange. Okay, and again, you can have a cool red, you know, cool reds, warm reds, you know, anyone who likes wearing lipstick knows what those mean. Okay, and you can have a warm goldish yellow or a cool greenish yellow. But orange, if you start adding things to it, you kind of get duller oranges, desaturated oranges, but you don't really get a cool orange or a warm blue, you know? So those are your two extremes. And so any color in the world can be figured out, defined, however, identified by these three things, okay? Take this red, for example, okay? It is a medium dark value. It is quite saturated, a little bit desaturated, okay? It's still pretty intense. It's not very dull at all. And it's warm temperature, okay? It's red, it's pretty warm. So let's talk about color schemes. First, let's talk about triadic color schemes. These are 3 colors, and each color is separated the equal amounts in between each color. So red, yellow, and blue. 3 colors in between red and blue, 3 colors in between red and yellow, and 3 colors in between yellow and blue. Equidistant from each other. Okay, red, yellow, blue, those are your primary colors. Orange, green, and violet are your secondary colors. And then you have 2 tertiary triads. One of them is yellow, orange, red, violet, and blue, green. And the other is yellow, green, red, orange, and blue, violet. These are your triadic color schemes. And then you have monochromatic color schemes. Monochromatic, it means one color. Mono equal one, chroma meaning color, monochromatic. And you know, people like monochromatic color schemes because they're easy. Like if everything is based off of one color, then it's easy to match and coordinate. You don't have to think about matching and what goes with what or whatever, right? And it looks very cohesive. Okay? Now, when I say monochromatic, I'm not saying that everything is this blue-green. You can also include tints, shades, and tones of the blue-green. Okay? So you can have varieties of the blue-green and still be monochromatic. Okay? What you can't do is start changing temperature. Okay? Changing temperature means moving around the wheel. You can't get warmer. Okay? That's no longer monochromatic. And you can't get any cooler because, again, that's no longer monochromatic. It's something else. We'll get to that in a second. But you could stick to the same blue-green tints and shades and tones in here. Okay, so speaking of tints and shades and tones, let me tell you what those are. Okay, so there are 4 ways to desaturate a color, creating softer tones, more muted tones, duller effects, creating neutrals, right? So 4 ways to desaturate a color. So number 1, we have tints. And you can create tints by adding white. We have some orange, and you can add some white, and you can make a lighter orange, okay? It's still got that pure orange look, but it's lighter. And now I want a creamsicle. Now, the second way is to create a shade. And you create a shade by adding black. And there are so many varieties of tints and shades depending on how much white and how much black you add. Here's a shade of orange, but it's mostly orange, so it's just a little bit darker. This has a lot of black, so it's a very, very dark orange. And then you have tones. Tones are created by adding grays. And again, there's so many different tones you can create by choosing different grays, 70% gray, 30% gray, light grays versus dark grays. And also by how much, orange you have in there compared to how much gray you have in there. Now, when you create tones, what you want to do is to mix the correct gray with your color. Okay, you want to pick the gray that has the same undertone as your original color so that you can get a nice tone. With warm colors like orange, yellow orange, red, I like to use warm grays. Okay, here's a 50% warm gray. And, you know, I can add a lot and make it a lot more gray. I mean, here's what the gray looks like by itself, and mixing with this orange, you know, it starts looking a little bit brownish. Okay. Or you could do a really light gray, warm gray. Here's a 10%, and you're almost creating a tint, but it's, you see that and that, how this one, you really see a light orange, and this is a dulled down light orange, okay? It's not as bright orange as the tint. If you have something like this and you start adding a cool gray, okay, the undertones are not the same. So it's like adding gray plus a little bit of blue to it. And so you're getting a completely different color, and you're making it a little bit muddier instead of creating true neutrals. You know, it's starting to look a little bit greenish. You see how it looks greener there because you're adding a little bit of that blue. So instead of it being darker orange, toned down orange, you know, a little bit brownier with those warm undertones, it's starting to look greenish. And so, I mean, you have to decide if that's what you want. Okay, so keep the undertones of your grays in mind. So with colors like blue and violet, you can create duller, less intense violets like that. Okay, these have the same undertones, so they marry well together. Or you can create duller and also lighter purples. So what do you want to do if you want a duller purple but the same value? You use the same value gray as the value of the violet you're mixing it with. With yellows and greens, I like to use French gray. And here's a dark 70% French gray. And I'm creating kind of a dark khaki color. That's kind of a really cool neutral in there. That's what the French gray looks like by itself, just warmed up a lot by the yellow. Here's one where the value is a little bit closer, not quite as light as the yellow, but the value is closer. We've done triadic, we've done monochromatic. The next I want to go over is analogous. Analogous, which is related to that word analogy. So analogous color schemes are color schemes that include like colors. We're talking about neighbors on the color wheel. So green, and blue would be an analogous color scheme. So it's similar to monochromatic in that it creates a cohesiveness because of all these similar colors, but there's more visual interest, a little bit more variety. You know, the question I get in class a lot is, you know, the color wheel, they're all neighbors. They're all next to each other. So how many colors is too many to be an analogous color scheme? And there's no hard and fast rule. You know, no one says only 4.2 colors. It's kind of a judgment call depending on the scenario. Like, one of the guidelines I use is no more than 5 colors. Okay, if you have half the wheel, I mean, that's a lot. Okay, that's not really a color scheme. That's just a bunch of colors. I like to include only one primary color. Okay, so this one, it has just the blue, and it has a bunch of colors. So there's 5 of them, but they all look cohesive together. When I'm figuring this out, I like all the analogous colors to have the same undertone. This looks analogous to me because everything has a blue undertone. There's a blue in every color, and so it looks cohesive, and they look like they belong together. When you start getting more than one primary color, Okay, you have red and yellow. So you have some that are red undertone, some that are yellow in undertone, and then you have, of course, the middle, and it starts getting a bit much. If you take out the yellow, everything has a little bit of red in it, and so this looks cohesive, okay? Here, if you have, everything has a little bit of yellow in it, and this looks cohesive. Okay? That looks a bit much. A variation on the analogous color scheme is your skip a step analogous color scheme, and that's when you have a range and you skip one. Okay, maybe it's the middle one. You have red, red, orange, yellow, and they all look like everything's on fire. Okay, or maybe you skip this one and you have all these like orangey gold colors, and then you have pops of red. Okay, so this is skip a step analogous color scheme. Next, we have complementary color schemes. And this is complementary with an E and not with an I. Okay. And complementary color schemes are opposites on the color wheel. So violet and yellow are complements, red and green are complements, and orange and blue are complements. When you put two complements together, because they're the furthest thing from each other, they create the highest contrast, so they make each other pop. If you watched my the time-lapse illustration where I painted the showgirl in gouache and she was covered in flowers, and I had the red violet flowers and I was putting a lot of yellow green into the leaves so that the complements working together would really make each other pop, because I really wanted those colors to just stand out very strongly. Okay, that's how complements are used. You might be thinking, well, then how do they go together? How do they harmonize together? You can harmonize them together by creating mutes with the color. Now, muting is the fourth way to desaturate a color. Muting is when you take your two complements, I'm going to use yellow and purple, and start mixing them together. All right, so this is not the best blending job I've ever done in my life. Oh my God, I'm trying to like move along with this tutorial here. But you can see by mixing different ratios of the complements, you know, here's 100% purple, here's 100% yellow. And, you know, with a little bit of purple, you're starting to get, you know, duller yellows. You're starting to get into more mustard territory. And here you're getting duller violets, more brownish purples, right? And you're creating all these neutrals in there, okay? And so you can have this bright yellow, you can have this bright purple, and then by incorporating some of these tones in here, I'm sorry, these mutes, incorporating some of these mutes in here, you can start creating a more harmonious color story. The fourth, fifth, 17th, whatever, color scheme I want to talk to you guys about is split comp, split complementary. Split comp is when you have a color, okay, pick green, and instead of the complement, your red, you are using the red orange and the red violet. Okay, so green, red, orange, red, violet, that is your split complementary color scheme. Blue, green, the complement is red, orange. The split comp is blue, green, red, and orange. And you can do this kind of technique to create what are called near mutes. So here is, this is mulberry, which is my red violet. Here is my violet blue, which is my blue violet. So again, you can create near mutes by mixing. There's my split complementary color scheme. Here's my yellow, and you can create near mutes by, you know, mixing these two colors. And because the red violet has that more red in it, you're starting to get orangier tones than what you see here. And then with the blue violet, because it's so much bluer, you're starting to get greener mutes than the full complement. That's how you start figuring out how to create colors. So you know how I said in monochromatic color stories, you have tints and shades and tones and all that? When you have analogous color schemes, you can have also tints and shades and tones. You can't have mutes because now you're introducing a totally different color. So let's say this is your analogous color story. So you can have tints and shades and tones of these four, but if you start creating mutes or near mutes, you're adding orange and red orange to the equation. You're changing the temperature too much, and it really ceases to be a true analogous color story. And you're like, Zoe, do I have to make every color story a pure analogous color story, a pure complementary color story? No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm giving you the definitions of what these things mean so that you have a knowledge base. So later on, when you are creating analogous color schemes, if you decide to make a temperature change, it's a deliberate decision and not an accident. With complementary color stories, you can tint and shade and tone and mute to your heart's desire. Okay, and with complements, you can tint and shade and tone and near mute and include all the ways of desaturating into your color story. You could have all these colors, or you could have, make this color duller with a lot of French gray. And so you have a tone of this color. And maybe you want to include a really light muted purple in there. Okay. And then I'm using all these grays. I'm using the cool grays for things that are more purple, and I'm using French grays for things that are more yellow. Okay. And so maybe I want not this bright yellow, but just a slightly more toned down yellow, because I don't want super sunshiny business all up in my collection. Okay. And maybe I don't want this vibrant purple. I want to keep that dark value, but I want it a little bit duller. So I'm going to add this 70% cool gray so that it's still purple. The value is not that different, but it is a little bit duller. And now you're creating this color story with your complements and creating tones and tints and shades and whatnot of your mutes. Okay, so you can create all kinds of, tints of tones and mutes of tints and blah, 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 all these things. But as long as you know what they are, then you know how to mix them, you know how to create those colors. And when you know how to create those colors, then you understand undertones. And so when you're like, well, I want to add another color in there, then if you pick a color with the right undertone, it will kind of insert itself into this color story easily. Okay, when things share the same undertone, everything works. Okay, you can want things to clash crazily. That's up to you. I'm just saying this is also a way you can do it. Okay, the more you know, the more deliberate decisions you can make. That's pretty much what it is. Designers make deliberate decisions on how they want their things to look. I'm not discounting happy accidents. Happy accidents are awesome. I think that was enough for today, right? That was a lot, okay? I have no idea how long I've been filming, but I feel like that's plenty of information for one day. If you found this video helpful, give me a thumbs up. If you are burning to have closed captioning available for all my videos on my channel and you've got $1 or $2 in your pocket, please consider donating on my channel main page. And share with anyone. These are basic color theory concepts that will help anyone in any art or design field. So, it really helps me out when you share my videos. And subscribe if you want alerts for when the next In the Color Theory series comes out. # always be practicing. and I will see you in the next video. Hey party people! Today I'm going to show you how I painted this color wheel using only 3 tubes of paint. Let's get started. I use the CMYK coloring wheel method, color system, what have you, to mix paints. Okay. I use the red, yellow, blue kind of standard color wheel color system for designing because that's what people are used to looking at. And so when I'm designing, I cater to, what people are used to looking at. But for mixing paints, I find that you get the best methods by using cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And so does your color printer. Okay, that's what your color printer takes. I don't have my magenta cartridge, but cyan and yellow and black. That's what your personal printer takes. That's what your professional printer takes. That's why whenever you want to print something, you want to format the document CMYK. All right. So of course you don't have to use the colors exactly the ones I use, but to help you get started, for magenta, I like the Winsor Newton gouache in Rose Tyrian. It's a little bit blue. Okay. And I also like the Winsor Newton Cotman watercolor in Permanent Rose, which is a tiny bit warm. So sometimes I just mix the two. I'm probably going to do that here. I'm going to cheat a little bit. For yellow, I use the gouache in Primary Yellow, the Cotman watercolor in Lemon. Yellow subtleties are harder to pick up, so you have a little bit more leeway with what you use. With blue, I use the Cotman, what is this, Cerulean? And for gouache, don't use the turquoise. Turquoise is too turquoisey, because cyan is not actually turquoise. People think it's turquoise, but it's pure, not as dirty, not as muted as turquoise. I like the gouache in cerulean. The primary blue is a little bit too blue, okay? It looks like cyan with a little bit of the magenta in it, okay? My favorite, and the one I'm using today, is the gouache in phthalo blue. And I think that is the closest to straight up ink cyan that I've seen so far. So again, you don't have to use these, but get something close. I find that using a color wheel to compare, okay, this is a great teaching tool that I love using. And when you have a hard time mixing a color, I find it really helps to have something next to you to compare to, so you're going back. Usually when you're working on a fashion project, that will be your fabric swatch. Make sure you're in a well-lit space, lay your swatch out, and then take a test piece of paper and mix your colors right next to your fabric, okay? If your fabric is shiny, okay? Make sure that your fabric is not facing the light directly, because that gloss, that shine, is going to affect how you view the color. But other than that, yeah, just like put it right next to your fabric. Longtime viewers know that I love gouache and I like watercolor, and I mix them all up all the time unless I'm really concentrating on making my paint opaque. Then I just use straight up gouache. If your tubes of paint get a little bit crusty, go to the tool store and get some, what am I using? Pliers? Yes, pliers. All right. I see students using their teeth and I full on yell at them. I'm like, don't use your teeth. Okay. Do not use your teeth to open tubes of paint. That is so bad for your teeth. Oh my God. All right. So I'm using the primary yellow gouache. I'm using the phthalo blue gouache. And I'm mixing up the Rose Tyrian and Permanent Rose because I'm a filthy cheater. But again, you could use either one. I don't care. And I drew a perfect circle using a compass or protractor. I always get those two words confused. Okay, I used one of those. And then I drew out 12 spaces so I can space out the colors evenly. And I'm just placing the colors mimicking the color wheel I'm using as a reference. It's not like yellow has to be 12 o'clock all the time. Because I want to concentrate on the colors being as pure and intense and concentrated as possible, I'm using several different brushes and several different cups of water, if you can see them on the very far left of the screen. With watercolor and gouache, if you want to make a lighter color, you typically just add some water. But if you're concentrating on making a color opaque, like if you wanted to put like light pink flowers on a black background, then you can use white gouache. I'm going to have a whole video dedicated to creating tints and shades and tones and what all those different things look like in the color theory series. Okay. But right now I am painting up some blues and purples, just mixing cyan and magenta together in different quantities. And the reason I have these like spaced out is it really helps figure out where to place everything. Okay, so right in the center between magenta and cyan, I have that purple, that violet, and then I get bluer and more cyan as I go to the left, and it's going to get more like red violet as I swing to the right. People think that painting is expensive or more expensive than marker renderings, and I don't really think so. You know, one of the points of this video is to show you that you don't need 100 million tubes of paint to mix a lot of colors. With markers, you need 100 million markers because, I mean, there are a few things you can do with layering markers, but I mean, not anywhere near with the flexibility of paints. And the initial cost of getting started with painting is higher because I advocate getting nice, high quality brushes to begin with, and the papers can be more expensive, but these tubes of paint last forever. And brushes, if you take care of them and you get good ones, they'll last you forever. I've had mine for decades. So in the long run, you know, it's not that much more expensive than markers, and markers can be really expensive because you have to keep buying new ones. They dry out or you don't have the right color, and an annoying teacher like Zoe comes along and says that marker does not match your fabric, you need to go get another one. So yeah, and you know, I am going to continue with the cheap the inexpensive art supply series. I have a bunch of gouaches and watercolors purchased for that video series. And yeah, let's see if we can find some gems in that kit of things that I bought. And again, here I'm doing some reds and oranges, just mixing magenta and yellow. That's all there is to it. And you can see I can get a really awesome, intense red. It's right in there in between magenta and yellow. I'm getting some really beautiful oranges and yellows in there. You might be thinking, so Zoe, does that mean you only have like 5 tubes of paint? No. Okay. So yes, I have cyan, magenta, yellow. I have black and white. And yeah, I do have a lot of other colors because there are colors that I use so frequently that it's a shortcut. You know, I buy tubes of paint as a shortcut. I'm going to show you how to make browns and, you know, warm neutrals like olive green and stuff in future videos. But, you know, things like burnt sienna, I use burnt sienna a ton, okay, because it's the base color for a ton of skin tones. And you will see that if you watch my skin tones video. So because I use it so much, I buy burnt sienna and I use it as my shortcut instead of starting over from scratch. But what I recommend for, especially for those of you beginning painters, is to start with these 3. And then, you know, as you keep painting, you're going to know what you need in terms of shortcuts. The point of this series is to show you, A, that you don't need all those tubes of paint, B, that you can get a million colors just using a few paints. And C, most important, where colors come from so that you know how to mix different colors to match your fabrics or what have you. Once you understand the base, okay, like how did I get olive green? Well, what I did was mix yellow and cyan, and that makes a bright green, okay? And you have different options to make duller greens, like adding black, adding gray, okay? And there are so many grays to choose from, right? But I'm gonna show you through these painting videos what it looks like when you add different grays and blacks to colors so that you can understand where these colors come from. So when you are trying to match that olive gray, olive green wool for your project, you know, oh, okay, so I have my green now. And when I add black, I get a different green, darker green, than when I add gray. Or when I add red to it. You're like, why would you add red to green? Because that dulls down the green, okay? Adding opposites, your complements, dulls down the color. I'm going to go over mixing up mutes in another video, but if you watch the first color theory basics video, you know that mutes are when two opposites on the color wheel are mixed together to create browns. How do I get the green I want? Do I want to add black? Do I want to add gray? Do I want to add a little bit of red? Do I want to add gray and red? Okay, so that's kind of the goal, is to like give you all the building blocks for what colors look like when they interact with each other so that you can be more efficient at mixing all these colors yourself. Now I'm just going in here and I want to show you guys, I want to show y'all like really intense colors. So I'm just going in here and just adding more of the same color and making things as intense and vibrant as I can. Remember the 3 elements of every color: value, saturation, and temperature. So I'm adding more of the color to make it more saturated, more pure, more intense. Okay. As I mentioned before, temperature is the warmth or the coolness of a color. So our warm colors are the yellows all the way to the red violets. And then our cool colors are from these greens all the way to the violets. And if it looks a little bit weird, it's because at this point I'm painting standing up so that I could kind of look at it at a different angle than I was before. I do that a lot, like as a finishing touch, just to make sure that it looks good from some illustration I do looks good from all angles. I'll stand up and kind of like tilt my head around. Hit the like button if you found this video helpful, and let me know in the comments your questions and what specifically you would like to see in the color theory series if I haven't addressed them already in this video. And subscribe so you get an alert for when I post more color theory videos. And yeah, go practice, mix up some paints, have some fun, document things, how you mix these colors if that's something that helps you. And I will see you in the next video. Hey, party people. This video is going to be a twofer. Number 1, we are going to go deep dive into the world of tints, shades, and tones. Number 2, we're going to test out this new to me brand of gouache called Knicker. It's a Japanese brand, as far as I can tell. They're made in Japan. Maybe, maybe not. And I got this set when I was in Japan last June, May and June. And I have yet to test them. I kind of forgot about them. Good job, Zoe. Good job. And I was cleaning and sorting and stuff, and then I found them, and I'm like, yeah. So anyway, I know, I'm the worst. Wow, this yellow ochre is like dripping stuff all over the place. Oh, that was pleasant. Anyway, yeah, so we are going to play around with tints, shades, and tones. and play around with these gouaches. So this will be a color theory study meets product review video. Whoop whoop. What am I using? Arches watercolor paper. It's my favorite brand of watercolor paper. And right now I'm just testing the gouache opacity. I just drew a line with pencil and I'm laying down bits of each color as opaquely as possible. And, you know, for the most part, you're not going to get it to cover pencil except for your darkest colors. Like this is Prussian blue I'm using right now. Yeah, that'll cover the lead, but you know, I'd be very surprised if the yellow and the orange and similar light colors covered up the pencil. But you can see it covers some of it, so you can kind of see the opacity there. And I imagine if I went back and put in a second layer, I would be able to cover it. But I always work under the supposition that gouache is not going to cover pencil, and I work around that, okay, when I'm painting. Tints are color plus white. With watercolor, there are two ways that you can create tints. You can add water to your color, or you can add white to your color. Right now, I am using the French red, which is a really nice red-orange shade. And I am just using wet on wet technique to create tints. Now, wet on wet technique is wet things on top of other wet things. So what I did was I just laid down some water on my paper and then I added the paint before the water dried. The thing with wet on wet technique is just because you can't see the initial layer of water doesn't mean you can just put water anywhere, because the paint will go wherever the water is, right? And so you have to limit your water to where you will eventually want color later. Okay, so I limited it to the pencil box that I drew, and then I put my paint, and I'm having a good old time here. These are actually my favorite kind of videos to shoot. These sort of like relaxing, kind of inconsequential painting things. I have a lot of fun with these. The other way you can create tints with watercolor is to mix the color with white. The tint that you get, okay, the paint color you end up with, will depend also on the kind of white you use. The white that I'm using is this, the white that came in the set, which is zinc white. And as you can see, it is a tiny bit on the cool side. Do you see how it is making the red orange a little bit cooler tone than when I was just mixing the red orange, the French red with water? And you can see the other half of the bar is warmer red oranges. You're gonna see me do this kind of weird thing where I'm mixing the color on the paper, and I only do that for these kinds of exercises. And also, if I were to do this for this demo, I'd run out of palette. But normally I do mix my color completely in the palette and not, adding paint separately to my paper and then mixing it on the paper. Okay? So yeah, the zinc white that this kit has, it's a little bit on the cool side, which isn't bad. It's just something that you need to be aware of so that when you're working with it, that helps you make informed decisions on paint mixing. Now we're going to paint some shades, and shades are color plus black. And the black I have in this set is ivory black. And just like whites, you know, blacks have their own coolness or warmness to it. And, you know, the Winsor Newton set of gouaches, they have jet black, ivory black, lamp black, and, you know, every brand has their own way of naming things. You know, one brand's ivory black is not the same as another brand's ivory black. So keep that in mind when you're shopping. But color plus black. So again, I'm using the French red and mixing it up with black. When I'm reaching to my left on the screen, that means that I'm reaching for my water jars. Normally, I would have the water on my right-hand side too, but just kind of my studio setup right now kind of makes things difficult. Spoiler alert, I am really enjoying these gouaches. Okay. Um, at this point, I remember when I was painting, you know, because this is my first time playing with them. I remember at this point, I'm like, huh, I think I actually like these better than the Holbeins. So if you recall, if you watched my Japan haul from last year, I bought several sets of gouache tester sets. And I bought the Holbein and I've used them a lot. I really enjoy them. But now that I'm testing out this brand, the Knicker brand, I really like them. I like them better than the Holbein, I think, a little bit. Like the Holbein has like a touch of plasticiness to it, whereas this doesn't. Okay. This actually feels more like the Winsor and Newton, and I might like that more because I'm just used to the Winsor and Newton, but these work really well. Right now, I am using, what am I using? Viridian Lake, okay, which is this nice blue-green color, and creating shades with it. I'm doing these examples for you so that you guys can get a starting idea as to what shades and tints and tones look like and how they compare to each other. But please do go through your own paints and start mixing up your own tints and shades and tones. All right, because you know, you have different blacks, you have different whites, you have different colors. They're all going to look slightly different, but it's up to you to explore and examine what adding different colors do. Like this is just a little bit of that yellow, the chrome yellow with the ivory black. And because the ivory black is a little bit on the cool side, it's starting to turn my chrome yellow a tiny bit green as I create shades. These are the kinds of things I want you to observe with your own paints. It's like, oh, when I add this black, does it make it cooler, warmer, neutral? Do I not even notice? Do I need more practice looking at colors? Probably. And here I am mixing orange and black, and it's starting to look brown. Yes, that is kind of the basis of brown is orange and black is a good place to get started. This is the Knicker Chrome Orange with the ivory black. Here's the same orange with a little bit less black, a little bit more, it's not quite pumpkin pie. Pumpkin pie is a little bit more golden, right? And now I'm mixing up 3 different grays to play around with tones. Now, tone is color plus gray. But that could mean a lot of things. You could have light grays, dark grays, French grays, neutral grays, cool grays, warm grays. Yeah, so many grays, right? You've seen those marker brands. Every marker brand has multiple sets of different shades of gray. You know, as I mentioned before, I'm just using the set. And so I'm getting a rather cool gray from this ivory black and zinc white. So I mixed up 3. And now I'm going to keep mixing them up with the French red from before so we can get a true comparison. And the colors are going to change a lot depending on, of course, what gray you use, which is important because it depends on the initial value of the color. This red orange, it's a medium value. It's a medium dark color. Remember, value is the lightness or darkness of a color. And this red is a medium value. Okay, it's not super light like the yellows, and it's not super dark like blue. It's a medium value color. And so when you add the light cool gray, you're going to end up with a lighter color than before, and it's going to be duller. And of course, the more gray you add, the duller and grayer it gets. But see, with the red orange and with the light gray, you get this sort of mauve color. It's cooler than the original red orange, and it's much lighter than the original red orange. This middle one, the second one I'm doing, is red orange with the medium gray. And because they're similar in value, the gray is a little bit darker, but they're closer in value, the color ends up being more similar. Now you see that it's a duller, richer, more brown version of the red orange, but it's closer than the lighter one because the values were closer. This third one, I'm using the darkest gray, and you will see as I finish mixing up this bar the difference between the shades and the tones. Even now, when you look at the second one, it is darker than the initial red orange, but it's browner and duller than the shades. The shades give kind of like a rich, kind of keeping the intensity of the red orange, but the tones tone things down. Haha, maybe that's where those words come in handy. See, they tone things down, they dull things down, and because of the white in there, things look a little bit creamier than a straight shade. And now I'm going to do the tones with that blue-green, the Viridian Lake color. And again, the light gray is much lighter in value than the original blue-green color. And so it's going to be very different. I used a little bit less than the red-orange experiment, but it still significantly lightened up the blue-green. And it's duller. Okay? You see that creamy sort of overall quality to it. Here's the middle one with the middle gray. And again, this is a little bit lighter still than the green, but again, it is a closer value match. So again, still looks more similar to the original green than the first tone. But again, it's got that creamy, sort of dulled down look, more neutral. Okay? And this is how you start creating more neutral colors. Okay, we're gonna keep going with the next video where I deep dive into mutes. But yeah, this is how you start developing softer, duller, more neutral colors. And then this third one is with the dark gray, and it is the closest value match to the green out of the three. So this is the least different, but it's still a little bit darker, a little bit duller. So, again, go through your paints, mix up some grays. And here is orange with gray, and here is orange with light gray. And you can see how these colors, they ended up looking brown also, are a little bit different than the first two I painted, the little dabs with the black. A little bit duller, a little bit creamier. The ones with black, just they still retain more oranginess. Now I'm playing around with their yellow ochre. So yeah, all these things that I've been discussing, they also pertain to tubes of paint that started off with more neutral colors. I'm playing with the yellow ochre, and now I'm creating shades of yellow ochre with the black. And then I'm going to show you tones with the yellow ochre so that you can see the difference. And this is how you're going to, in the future, this is how you're going to use the information. You know, when you need a color, you know, you're going to think back to these experiments you did and was like, oh yeah, you know, I need to match this fabric color. It's purple. It's a little bit duller than your standard bright purple. You know, I would take this, maybe mix a straight purple and be like, all right, this one is a little duller. Okay, darker and duller. So maybe I add a dark gray to it. Okay, you take these experiments off of this video and apply it to future color mixing experiments. Okay, here I am mixing some water with yellow ochre, so you get to see what those tints look like. And you'll see later on when you have, you know, an off-white color, beigey colors, and you're like, oh yeah, I've made that color before. Oh yeah, it's just yellow ochre and white. And now I'm mixing up yellow ochre with grays, and I'm creating these really gorgeous khaki colors. These colors that you couldn't get with the black. The black with the yellow ochre, we're creating more cool browns. Whereas now with the gray, with the cool gray, you're getting things a little bit green. You know, you're getting, I'm actually really liking these colors. These kind of dark khakis, medium khakis, with the yellow ochre and the various values of grays that I mixed before. When I'm experimenting, I tend to keep things kind of more orderly so that it stays locked in my mind. Like, this is what happens when you add black, and this is what happens when you add water, which is weird. It's like orderly experimentation. That's just straight up burnt sienna from the tube. I just wanted to show you how, you know, now you know kind of the origin of burnt sienna. So yeah, final thoughts on that gouache. I really like this gouache. I'm going to be painting with these like in the future. Like my next time-lapse paintings will probably be using this brand. I am enjoying it a lot. If that changes, I will let you know. But for now, I'm really digging it. I really encourage you guys to experiment with paints and mix your own colors, and playing with paints and mixing paints and figuring out how these work together will also help you figure out how to get the correct colors when you're working in Photoshop and Illustrator, and also when you're working with other media. So, hashtag always be practicing, hashtag practice not magic. We are not made of magic, we are made of practice. So go practice, and I will see you in the next video. Oh yeah, don't forget to like and, you know, share, subscribe. Oh, you know, all that good stuff. The regular sound off stuff, right? Have a great time practicing, and I will see you in the next video. Hey party people. Today we're going to work on mutes. We're going to deep dive into what a mute is and how to create it using paint. Today we are using the Knicker brand gouache again. I have basically fallen in love with this gouache. It's really giving Winsor & Newton a run for its money and kind of leaving the Holbein in the dust. I still have one more gouache brand. No, wait, two. The Pebeo and the Talons brand that I still need to really deep dive into, but this Knicker brand is just awesome. Anyway, so this is going to be another deep dive painting sesh. This is going to be the last in the really technical color theory videos for a little while. The next color theory videos are going to be taking all this technical information I have been throwing at y'all and applying it to fashion. Are you excited? Are you excited? This is what you've been waiting for, right? You know, I really felt like I needed to give you all this a lot of this background technical vocabulary, just like really show you where these colors come from so that I can show you how it applies in picking colors for your collections and how to do color blocking and how colors affect the mood of a dress and how to make things more figure flattering with different colors. And I'm going to talk about all those things in the future videos now that we've really gone through the technical. Okay, this is what I do in class. Where I take a concept, I deep dive into the technical before I talk about how it applies to fashion directly. Okay, so yeah, that's going to be the next few color theory videos where I talk about how complements work in fashion and how mutes work in fashion and how monochromatic color schemes work in fashion, etc., etc. All right, and so yeah, all right. So mutes. All right, let's get all technical about mutes. What are mutes? They are the fourth out of the four ways to desaturate a color. There's tints, shades, tones, and mutes. And these four words are very specific in the way they're used in color theory. I know people use adjectives and verbs, toning things down, muting things down, tinting things, shading things much more loosely, and sometimes I do that too. But when we're talking about exact color mixing, these words tint, shade, tone, and mute are very specific. Tint is color plus white, tone is color plus gray, and that could be a light gray, dark gray, warm gray, cool gray, etc. And shade is color plus black, and mute is color plus its complement, which is its opposite on the color wheel. So red plus green, they're mutes. Orange and blue are mutes. Yellow and violet are mutes. And they're mutes and they're used together to mute the other. As in, when you say mute, you think silent, quieting down. Okay, so when you add green to red, you're quieting down the intensity of the red. Literally what it means. Red plus orange is red-orange. Okay? And when you add red plus yellow, that's orange. And when you have red plus blue, that's purple, and red plus purple is red purple, or you're starting to get into like red, violet, magenta categories. But when you add red and green, that's when you start getting these more neutrally colors. And I really, if you really want to understand colors, I highly recommend that you do similar color mixing experiments. You don't have to work really hard on creating a beautiful gradient like I'm doing right now. Like, I like painting gradients, and I wanted to make something pretty for y'all to look at while I'm talking. But just simply try mixing a red plus a green to see how that red looks compared to red plus black or red plus gray, okay? Because those are all different ways of desaturating the red, but they're completely different. The warmth of the green, green has a lot of yellow in it. The warmth of the green is going to make the red more brown. Okay? Like gray plus red, depending on how warm or cool the gray is, it's going to keep red pretty cool. Like red is it's a warm color, but it's on the cool side of warm. if that makes sense to you. And so red is one of those colors, if you tip it in one direction, it could get really cool, like burgundy, or it can get really warm, like poppy red-orange. Anyone who wears a lot of red lipstick knows what I'm talking about. So when you add the green, the warmth of the green, and then toning it down because it's the opposite, you get these warmer browns, and you also get these duller greens. And again, those greens are going to be really different from when you have green plus black versus green plus gray. versus green plus red. And again, I really encourage you to mix those colors yourselves with the paint that you have. Now, just like in the previous video where I was talking about, um, especially with the grays, with tones, how you can really change the color depending on whether you add color plus dark gray, color plus medium gray, color plus light gray. Okay, you're getting lots of different colors, and then colors versus plus warm gray, plus French gray, plus cool gray, you know, all these different things that you could do. The same is true of mutes. It's not just full on red plus full on green. I mean, those colors are awesome, but you can also, again, add in a black so you have a shade of a mute, and you can get some really dark, dull greens, beautiful olives, or you can add some white. And see how here I'm adding some water to the brown that I created with the red and green. And so you're getting lighter and lighter browns. Okay, so that's a tint of a mute. I know, like in class when I'm lecturing, I get all tongue twisted and I'm like, there's no editing in class. Anyway, so yeah, you add black to it, you start getting super dark, like dark umber, like black brown colors, and then you add white and you get the lighter browns, and you have the whole range. And you can play with that too, and you can also make a tone of a mute or whatever you want. But understanding, you know, the base of a mute will really help you. So here I am mixing white and black. So I have a bit of a cool gray because the permanent white and the ivory black tend to make a cool-ish gray. Not super cool, but cool-ish. And then adding red with a touch of green is now creating these tones. And they're like light neutral, but not bright enough to be pastel-y. Like we associate pastels that are very bright, not dulled down with a lot of the gray. Okay, but now I'm creating these like dusty roses and these muted celadon jade colors, which I really like. And again, it all depends on how much gray. You know, you can have something that's a lot of gray, something that's a lot more green, so that it's just lightly dulled down or borderline. So this bar, I'm showing you just a tiny percentage of the colors that you could create by using red and green and white and black, essentially. Before I paint each of these mute bars, I mix the colors to match the color wheel that I'm using, just so you all are seeing some kind of consistency. So of course I have orange and blue tubes of paint, but they're not the oranges and blues on the color wheel. So I'm just, I'm throwing in a yellow into this orange so that I'm getting a closer match to the color wheel, and then I'm going to try to get the right blue. Now I am doing the orange and blue mutes color bar, mute bar, gradient bar, bar. And again, adding a little bit of the blue is going to mute down that orange. and adding a bit of the orange will mute down the blue. And when you get to the middle, okay, you're going to end up with a different warm neutral than you did with the red and green, because, you know, some people think like, well, when you get to the middle, you basically have red, yellow, and blue all up in there. Because when you have red and green, you have red, and green is yellow and blue, right? And then you have orange and blue, which is orange is red and yellow, and then blue. But it's the different quantities and ratios of the colors that create different warm neutrals, different browns. So when you mix orange and blue, you're going to get a slightly different brown than you would mixing red and green. Also, it's nice to have options. And so when you are trying to get a nice brown that goes well with orange and you want your undertone family to be all the same, I would recommend that you create a brown using orange with blue. And again, with the green, if you want a brown and a bunch of warm neutrals that all share a greenish undertone, then I would suggest that you start with the green and start adding bits of red and, you know, maybe a little bit of black as needed. Now, a thing that's very different from the orange and blue mutes to the red and green mutes is values. Remember, value is the lightness or darkness of a color. And so when you're mixing these colors, the value becomes very important. Blue is a very dark color. So adding a little bit of blue, this very dark color, dark value color, to orange is going to impact the orange a lot, because the orange is only at like 40%. And this kind of straight up blue is more like 70-80%, right? Whereas the red and green, they're pretty similar in value. Like when you look at the straight up green and the straight up red, one is not significantly darker than the other, right? Whereas with the orange and blue, the blue is significantly darker than the orange. So when you are mixing your oranges and your blues, remember to chill out on that blue. Keep a conservative hand on that blue, because it will really overpower the orange very quickly. And here again, I am mixing mutes and also tints and shades and tones of mutes so that you can get another few ideas on how to create these colors. So I've taken the mute and I am adding more and more water to create tints of mutes. And you can see how these colors lightened up. Like you can really see the differences in the browns and the undertones a little bit more clearly. Yes? No? Hopefully? It's okay. It doesn't come overnight. You know, you have to kind of increase your eye sensitivity by practicing looking at colors. Okay? That's what I do a lot in my color classes, make my students practice looking at colors. And so here we are with the orange. I'm adding a lot of water, so you're getting a tint of orange going into tints of mutes, and now you're seeing these, they're greenish because they're more orange than they are blue, but again, you get these like khaki olivey colors that are again really different from the mutes of greens mixed in with the red. And now on this side, we are doing, what am I doing? Oh, I'm mixing in some gray with my blue to create tones of mutes. Tones of mutes of shits and tints. Well, did I say shits and tints? Good job, Zoe. Oh. Oh my god. My boss one time asked me if I wanted to teach a high school class, and I was just thinking, sitting there thinking like, oh. Even my husband was like, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, you with anyone that's young, I mean, even 18-year-olds, that's just, because again, you can't edit in person. Oh. Anyways, here we go. We have created mutes, but with a light gray. And so I've lightened the blue a lot. The value of the orange is a little bit darker because the gray is kind of close to the value of the orange. And now you're seeing these tints of a mute. And now you've got these awesome dull blues and cool browns. Okay, more in the umber sepia kind of family. I don't know. I'm not great with those words. I just like, when I talk about color, I like being very explicit in saying cool brown, warm brown, cool gray. Like those things make more sense to me than trying to use, branded names. I used to have this job and we did a lot of leather. And, people don't get super adventurous with leather colors. And it's not like I blame them. Like, leather is typically an investment piece. You'll buy a leather jacket and wear for many years or hope to wear for many years. And so not a lot of people will buy a raspberry pink leather jacket, but they tend to stick to browns and blacks. But every season you have to make it new and exciting, right? And so we would have to sit there and come up with new and exciting ways to tell people this is our new dark brown and this is our new light brown. And we would sit around and think of ways, different words for brown. We resorted to a lot of really just smoking and drinking things. We had tobacco, we had whiskey, scotch, amaretto, coffee, espresso. A lot of these are great brown descriptives. Espresso being like your darkest brown and coffee being just like slightly under that. And amaretto having a little bit more red in it, and whiskey getting like a little bit light with, gold undertones, so many browns, so many colors for brown, and then you get like more caramel, cognac, butterscotch. Then you start getting hungry, you want candy, and you're in this meeting listing browns, and you're like, okay, let's take a break, and everyone goes back to do their own thing, and then someone hops into your office and is like, oh, I thought of another one. Browns. So many words for brown, 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 brown. But in color class, in design class, I like to talk to my students as, hey, let's do a more reddish brown. Let's do a more dark brown. Like, I think that actually is more helpful. But marketing, branding, making things exciting and stuff. Now we are doing the yellow and violet mutes. And again, I am adjusting my paint colors to match up with my color wheel. And yeah, I think I kind of really struggled with the violet because it was very, very different from the color wheel violet. Not to say that my paints are wrong, that's just the paint I had. And the violet and the yellow, their values are even more extremely different than the orange and the blue, okay? Like yellow tends to be like a 10-20% value, and the violet is your darkest on the color wheel, which is at like 80-90, give or take. So as I was saying before, like be careful when you start adding violet to yellow, because the violet can be overwhelming really quickly if you add too much. So keep a light touch on that violet. So to review, one of the reasons why people like complements so much is because they're opposites on the color wheel. They offer the most contrast to each other, which makes the contrast pop more. And so when you put blue and orange together, the blue looks bluer and the orange looks oranger. Someone asked me to sum up color theory in one concept, like what's the point of understanding color theory? It's just colors. It's like, well, the whole point of color theory is to see how different colors go with different colors, because when you put certain colors with different colors, the color itself looks different. For example, when you put orange next to blue, the orange really pops and the blue really pops because they're opposites. The contrast really makes them pop, okay? When you put blue next to green, they look harmonious and they start blending in together, okay? Neither of them really pop. When you look at a lot of movie posters, their whole goal is to be eye-catching, and so they will employ complements a lot so that the color contrast and the pops really catch your eye, okay? Next time you go to the movie theater or a mall where there's a bunch of movie theaters, look at some posters and see if you can spot the color schemes that they're using and why they're using them. If they want, like a lot of the time when they want something that's more like, this is going to be a slow winding drama, they'll use more colors that are harmonious and closer together on the color wheel. And when they want something that's going to be more action, drama, things exploding, you're going to see a lot of orange, red, fire with a lot of this blue, green kind of background landscape. A lot of blue glass skyscrapers exploding with like orange flames shooting out, you know, like that kind of thing. So complements make things pop, but there is a harmony to that because they're exact opposites. Opposites attract, something, something. And so when you start muting them, okay, when you have an orange and a blue, and then you have like a muted orange and then some browns that have orange and blue in them, then you're starting to get similar undertones. And you're starting to create a family of colors that work well together, despite the fact that they're so different. Okay? And again, in future videos, we're gonna talk more. I could talk about color theory until forever. So, I mean, as long as y'all are continue to be interested in studying color theory, I will keep making videos going into color theory. I think color and understanding color is so important, not just to fashion design, but to any kind of visual art or design, product design, graphic design, because color is number one thing we notice about any product, whether it's a wearable or not. When you walk into a store, okay, and you're looking at a bunch of clothes, what is the thing that makes you gravitate towards something? Okay, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the color. Okay? You don't know if it fits you right yet. You don't know how the fabric feels yet. You haven't even been over there to touch it. You don't know if it's going to make your butt look good. You don't know if it feels really great against the skin. You don't know, unless you go to a designer-specific store, you probably don't know who made it. But that color is going to attract you. It's a color that you love. It's a color that you hate, and you're just looking at it because you're like, why would anyone make that color? Okay? But the color will attract you. Okay? You're going to look at it and be like, oh, that color is great. Or, oh, that color always looks awesome on me. I want it. Or, oh, it's black. I love it already. Okay, that's just me. So getting the color right in clothes, in collections, in your products, really important. So again, I could talk about color theory for 800 years. Yeah. So again, this last bar, it is, what was I doing? I was adding tints and shades and making tints and shades and tones of tints and shades and tones. So I'm just testing out a little scrap piece of the Fabriano paper that I bought in LA. It's really cheap paper. It's super, super smooth, not the cold press paper I was using earlier. I was demoing on the Arches Cold Press 140-pound watercolor paper for the mute bars, and that is my holy grail watercolor paper. It's my favorite. It's also as expensive as shit, so yeah. I'm testing out all these other papers. I'm not going to go as in-depth with the tertiary mutes as I did the primary and secondary mutes, but I did want to show you again that you can use tertiary complements to create mutes and tints and shades and tones of mutes as well. And let me tell you, when I was shooting this, I remember distinctly, I was like, wow, this paper is terrible. Okay, that was like the first impression, and then as I kept painting, I got more the hang of it, so I really do have to test this paper out more before I can really slam it, but I did not have a great first impression, but it was just barely good enough where I'm like, all right, let's try it again later. But yeah, so here's yellow, green, and red, violet. So what are tertiary colors? Okay, so primary colors are red, yellow, blue. Secondary colors are orange, green, and purple or violet. And your tertiary colors are the in-betweens, your yellow greens and your red oranges, etc., etc. And again, you can use your tertiary complements, opposites on the color wheel, to create mutes like I did with the yellow green and the red violet. And again, like I did with the others, you can add black to create shades of mutes, and you can add gray to create tones, and etc., etc., etc. And again, you know, using these express colors are going to create slightly different neutrals. So here I created a light tone of a mute, and I kind of love that weird mauve-y clay color. I love that. Here we are with a little bit of yellow-orange and a little bit of the blue-violet, another pair of tertiary complements. And we're just going to mix those up. Ooh. And we get a bit more greeny browns in here. The nice thing about this paper, though, is it's so smooth that creating that gradient with a really thick gouache just... So here's another light gray mixed in with the mute. And now you have this like beautiful celery. It's like a really light celadon pottery color. I love that. And yeah, you really should be doing exactly what I'm doing, which is like playing around and kind of cataloging the colors that you use to create different colors. And even if you don't make your own YouTube videos, I mean, why not record yourself doing mixing exercises so you can go back and see, how did I mix that color again? Oh yeah, how's these colors? You know, is really a nice reference. Here is red-orange with blue-green, excuse me. I really hope that this video was helpful for you in understanding color theory more thoroughly. Please give this video a thumbs up if it helped you, and if you would like me to continue the color theory series, and if you want me to continue by applying these color concepts to fashion. My tentative lesson plan right now is to just straight up draw some croquis and slap some colors down, and we can study how different colors affect the designs of dresses. Okay, and that's really the most direct way to study it. And also another reason why I push people to learn basic drawing skills. You don't have to be a brilliant illustrator, but to have basic drawing skills so you can test colors in the way that I plan on showing you in future videos. Go mix up some paints, go have fun, go practice, subscribe if you haven't already, drop me all your questions in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video. Hey party people, today we're going to talk about split complementary color schemes and how to use them in fashion design and illustration. So let's go over some vocabulary, and then we're going to get into application later in this video. First of all, what is split complement? So rewind a tiny bit. What is a complementary color scheme? Complementary color schemes are opposites on the color wheel. Violet's complement is yellow, opposite of the color wheel. Red violet's opposite is yellow green, etc., etc. Okay? Split complements take your first color, green, for example. The opposite of green is red. The complement of green is red. But split complementary color schemes use the neighbors of the complement. So green's split complements are red violet and red orange. And these three together make up a split complementary color scheme. Because of their uneven positions on the color wheel, each color has their own split complements. Okay, so what I mean by that is green's split complements are red violet and red orange. But that doesn't mean that red violet's split complements are green and red orange. Okay, if you use my kind of messy but effective cutout, if you start with red violet's split complements are green and yellow. And then red orange's complements are green and blue. So yeah, they share that green, but the trio is different. And the trio, you know, the mood, the vibe, the scheme, everything is different because that third color is different. Okay, so every color has their own two distinct split complements. Previously, when we had discussed complementary colors, okay, and there's that whole video on muting. Okay, I'll post a link in the description note. I listen to so many podcasts. I keep wanting to call them the show notes because that's how podcasters say it. They're like, and we're gonna leave you a link in the show notes. So in my head, I keep thinking, I'm gonna drop a link for you in the show notes. Anyway, so I'm gonna drop a link to the muting, making neutral colors with complementary color schemes video in the show notes. But basically, when you add the opposite, violet and yellow are opposites, they're complements, you get muted colors. And similar to this, with split complements, you can create what are called near mutes with split complementary colors. So I can mix a red orange with a blue to create a near mute, which is going to start giving you those, you know, toned down, neutrally colors. And if you go this direction, your neutral colors are going to start looking a little bit warmer because both these colors have yellow in them. And so you have like a more warmer vibe over here. If you start muting with the blue, you're going to get a slightly cooler vibe with your neutrals, just like any other color scheme. A split complementary color scheme is not just these three pure colors, but any variation and combination of tints, shades, tones, and mutes of each of these colors. So if you have a tint of a red orange, which is red orange plus white, and if you have a shade of a green, which is green plus black, and if you have a tone of a blue, which is blue plus gray, that's still a split complementary color scheme. Okay, when you say split comp, you mean the base of each color is a split complementary color scheme, not just the pure color. So remember when I said we could create near mutes with these three colors? Okay. So here is the red with some of the blue-green. And here's more of the blue-green. And here's even more of the blue-green. So you're seeing some of the transition. You see how the colors are working together. And let's try creating near mutes with the green. So that's red with yellow green. That's red with more yellow green, and some more, and some more. So you're seeing the transitioning of the colors becoming more neutral. And as I mentioned before, because there's warmer tones in here, the neutrals are warmer, they're mustardy, yes, approaching mustardy colors, greenish. And then in here, because the blue-green is so close to blue, you're starting to see more violety, especially in here. So depending on how you want to mute the colors down, what kind of more neutral colors you're going for, you can mix them appropriately. Now, mixing the yellow green and the blue green, you end up getting a completely different color. And so it kind of veers off the split complementary course. I think at this point, you all know what tints and shades and tones look like. If you don't, I have so many videos. But here is white with this. Okay, so you can just start making so many colors. Here's more white. And you're starting to get these browns. And then, we're getting kind of close to flesh tone territory, right? At this point, you may be thinking, but Zoe, I've seen your skin tones videos, and any video where you start talking about skin tones, and you usually start with burnt sienna or burnt umber. Well, yeah, you only need magenta, yellow, cyan, and black to make any color, okay? If you need proof of that, just look in your printer. Your color printer has cartridges for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and they print out every single color. And I know some color printers have a gray cartridge, and that helps with subtleties, but what is gray? It's like black, okay? Now, when I buy colors like burnt sienna and burnt umber, they're shortcuts, because burnt sienna and burnt umber are basically shades of orange. If I'm going to use a shortcut a lot, like burnt sienna, it is worth it to me to buy the tube of burnt sienna. Okay, but if you want to start painting and you don't have that much money, or you don't want to invest a lot of money yet, yeah, just get the 4, magenta, cyan, yellow, and black. And here's some white with these near mutes. And because of the blue tones, you're creating a pink with more of like a lilac tone, because you've got so much blue in there. And then over here, you're getting this dusky blue-gray. So I could do this all day because I love picking colors and I love making color swatches. However, we don't have all day. If you want a homework assignment from me to explore split complementary color schemes, here's what I would do. If you really want to study color mixing, the only way to do that is to literally mix your colors. Okay, so what I would do is I would take a set of split complements that you like. So start with your purely saturated warm near mutes. In this case, it would be the red plus the yellow green. And then I would do a gradient bar of the cool near mutes. In this case, it would be the red plus the blue green. And then I would do tints of those, shades of those, and tones of those. Tints of the warm near mutes, shades of the warm near mutes, and tones of the warm near mutes. Okay, and really understand how, you're going to really get where these colors are coming from. You're not going to be able to create every single color variation possible with this chart, but you're going to start getting an idea as to the realm of possibility. And the more you mix your colors and play around and document what colors you mixed in order to get specific colors, the better you're going to have an understanding, the better painter you're going to be, and the better you are going to be at selecting colors and color stories for future design projects. Now, I designed these 3 dresses, or this one dress, And I deliberately chose a skinny stripe and a broad stripe so we could play with color proportion. Because it's not even so much what colors you pick, but how, in what quantities you use the colors to get the effect that you want. Like if you use a lot of warm colors, what is that, what effect does that give versus if you use a lot of cool colors? Okay, really quick, because you guys always ask me what I'm using. I'm using Pabeo gouaches in dark cadmium red, and then the middle cadmium yellow, and Winsor & Newton cerulean blue. I've been using the Winsor & Newton for a long time, and I enjoy them a ton. I have a bunch of these. They're great. Pabeos, I've only been using in the past year, maybe? And I've been enjoying them, but they're still new-ish to me. All right, so these 3 dresses, clearly not the most amazing painting jobs I've ever done, but not the point, right? This is a tone of a red. This blue is a shade of a near mute. And this green is a light shade. Just like a little bit of black in there. This is a tint of a yellow green. This is pretty close to just straight up red. And then we have this blue green has like a touch of red and a touch of white in it. Okay, to harmonize back with the red a little bit better. And this is a very, like, tons of water added to create this very tint of a blue-green. So this is a tint of a near mute of red and a tone of the yellow-green. So I use these words so that you understand what colors I mix together. But essentially, every single one of these colors was painted using red, yellow-green, blue-green, white, and black. And varying degrees of water, of course. Okay? Now, which of these is your favorite? Which of these do you think is the best one? I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. And think about it like this, too. It's like, which of these is right for your customer? Oh, my customer is young, they like bright colors, they like something that looks fresh and vibrant, or my customer is a little bit more conservative, they don't really do loud colors, they like things looking a little bit more subtle. Okay, so which one is your customer? Also, what season are you designing for? Which of these 3 colorways? Okay, so maybe for winter you put a sleeve on it, and maybe for summer you make it a little shorter. But just the colorways, which one works for fall, which one works for spring or resort, okay? So you have to think about it in those terms, because when it comes to color stories, it's not usually about ugly and beautiful. It's about what's right for the customer, what's right for the age, what's right for the season, what looks right with the base fabric you put on it. Which of these fabrics would look cool on a shiny fabric, and which of these would look cool on something nubbly and fuzzy. And then in terms of illustration, okay, if you watch my painting my football padding collection thing videos, then you will have heard me say that I'm gonna paint the hair at the very end, because hair to me is like, okay, what's gonna make the rest of this look good? I never start by saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna draw this blonde girl. It's very rare that I do an illustration project like that. It's really like, okay, this is the fabric swatch I was given, or this is the design that I'm painting. What's gonna look good with this? What hair color is gonna make this dress really pop out? Why don't you answer me in the comment section and you give me why you think so? It's like, Zoe, I think that a platinum blonde would look great on the blue dress because... Okay, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because color theory is really about getting base information, like, hey, this is a split complementary color scheme. taking that base information and analyzing it for your needs. Please do hit the thumbs up button if you found this video helpful and if you would like more color theory videos in the future. And share, subscribe. Oh, don't forget to hit the gray notification bell because apparently you don't actually get notifications if you don't hit the bell, even if you subscribe. That's how it works, apparently. Go paint some swatches, go mix some colors, practice, hashtag always be practicing, and I will see you in the next video. Hey party people. In this video, I want to show you how color theory concepts translate in practical application to fashion design. I have mentioned this before, but I use two different color wheels. I use your standard red, yellow, and blue color wheel for design purposes, for matching colors, for figuring out what goes with what, figuring out color schemes. And then I use a cyan, magenta, yellow, black color wheel for the actual mechanics of color mixing. Okay. And today I'm going to paint using inks. Y'all always like to know what materials I'm using. So briefly, I will show you. Today I'm going to experiment with Holbein inks and liquid watercolors, basically. And the Sennelier inks, I'm using Bien Fang watercolor paper, cold press, 140 pound, etc., etc. And I'll put all the colors and, the specifics in the description box below. But just know that with the inks, I'm still experimenting. I don't have an opinion on these inks yet. I'm trying to use them more so that I can give you a proper product review later on. Okay. So first, I'm just mixing up some color. So I have these three dresses here. They're identical in design, and I'm going to paint the flowers in the same red color. It's a cool red, more a little bit tinged with a little bit of blue, as opposed to a warm red, which is tinged with a little bit of yellow. And it's got a tiny bit of black in it, so it's a shade of a cool red. Remember, shade is color plus black. Tint is color plus white, or in our case, color plus water, because water is how we lighten watercolors typically. And tone is color plus gray. And so I'm going to do the flowers of this print on all three dresses the same. And I'm going to paint the background fabric color in different colors so that we can discuss how to choose the right color for your design. Okay? Because, color theory is not like math where there's so many clear-cut yes, no, right, wrong answers. Okay? In math, 4 plus 2 is 6. That is it. The end. Have a nice day. Okay? That's not how color theory works. Okay, color theory is more like, okay, what is the message you're trying to give your customer? What kind of look are you going for? What kind of mood are you trying to convey with the color palette that you've put together? Okay, are you going for, aggressive, assertive, strong? Are you going for soft, muted? Are you going for melodramatic? Like, what do you find the color story that matches your collection. Now, this first dress, I am using a monochromatic color scheme. So I took that first cool red, added a ton of water to it, and now I have this, it's like, I wouldn't even call it pink. It's like a soft red. Okay. But when you have a monochromatic color scheme, it's an easy harmony because the color base is the same. Okay. Remember, monochromatic color schemes doesn't mean that all the colors are the same. It means that you have a color and you use tints, shades, and tones of that color to create the color story. So this first dress is a monochromatic color story. Okay. And you have a very strong red you know, they're desaturated reds. There's not a red that's like a very bright poppy stop sign red, but it's a red color story. You're kind of giving that message. This is a message. It's very feminine, okay, because of so much red that's also looking on the pink side, okay. It's got flowers, so it's already got more of a feminine look, okay, and you're really pushing that. Now, the second one, I'm going to use an analogous color scheme. An analogous is, if you recall, and if at some point you get lost, go watch that first video in the color lessons playlist that goes over all these vocabulary words in depth. Analogous color scheme basically is using colors that are neighbors on the color wheel. So if I'm using a red, what are its neighbors? You can go warm side and go red, orange, orange, yellow. Or you can go cool side and go, red, red, violet, 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 blue, like in that direction. Or you could do a little bit of both. You could do like a little red, red, orange, and a little red, red, violet, that kind of color family. And in this one, so that I can have a distinct difference between the first one and this one, I'm going for a desaturated red-orange. And I am purposefully using not the perfectly saturated colors that you see on the color wheel, because we often do not design with those colors. Okay, so I'm using the red-orange. I've desaturated it a lot. It's a shade. Okay, I added a tiny bit of the Higgins Black India ink, and I've turned it almost brown. Okay, but it gives an overall earthy look. Now, when you look at the first two dresses, okay, to me, I look at the first one and I think spring. This would be appropriate for a spring collection with the lightness of the pink soft red. And the second one, because of the warmth of the red-orange shade, it looks more appropriate for fall. Okay? I deliberately tried to choose very kind of like neutral silhouettes so that wouldn't, make you think one way or the other, but really give the message with the color. And I think that warmth with the brown and the dark red coming in together, that gives more of a fall look. That gives a little bit older, slightly more sophisticated look as opposed to the monochromatic color scheme. What do you think? Now, this third one, I am applying a complementary color scheme. Okay, so complementary colors are opposites on the color wheel. Red's complement is green. So I'm doing the background in green, but I don't want it to look like Christmassy. Okay, that's the thing with red and green, is if you're not careful, it looks Christmassy. But this one, I created a muted green. Mutes are color plus complement to create a more neutral color. And so I've got a tiny bit of that reddish undertone to the green so that it harmonizes back to the red, and you create this red and green color palette that doesn't look Christmassy. Okay? But because the colors are complements, the number one thing they do is make the other color pop while still harmonizing together. And so the green looks more fresh and vibrant, and the red looks brighter because the fact that they're sitting next to each other. Remember, the whole thing about color theory is, the whole point of color theory is that colors don't matter by themselves. Colors always look different depending on what color you put it next to. And figuring that out, figuring how colors work together and how they look together is what is going to help you be a better designer. The next concept I want to discuss is value, value usage, and value placement. Value is the lightness or the darkness of a color. Okay, so in a previous video, I talked about high key, middle key, low key. I think that was in the multi-figure composition video where I talked about how value creates mood and how it creates composition. And I mean, that one, it focuses more on the multi-figure composition, but the concepts are still the same for a singular dress. And so where you place your light colors, where you place your dark colors and your middle colors, and how you use dark colors and all that, all those things add to the design, add to the effect, the overall effect. And so that's something I want to show you in these three dresses. In this first dress, I'm keeping things fairly middle key, and I am going to create a gradient where the ruffles towards the hem get darker, but I'm still keeping the value range fairly narrow. Okay? I'm not creating a lot of contrast. Okay? I want, in this particular instance, I want softer transitions. Okay, I still want the gradient. I want the visual interest of the gradient, but I want to keep it kind of a narrow focus. Side note, this ink dries so fast, I had no time to blend my shadows. Oh my God. So that painting doesn't look great. All right, in this middle dress, I am creating the gradients again, but I'm using more of a full range of values where I start off lighter, and it wasn't light enough, so here I am adding a little bit of water. And I am creating much darker ruffles at the bottom than I did in the first dress. And it's not turning out that way, so I'm just going to keep applying color until I get the value range that I want. And I created this burgundy color for the bottom ruffles, and then so you have the full range. Okay. Which do you prefer? Do you like the narrow middle key color range, or do you like the extreme pale pink to the burgundy? Okay. There is no right answer. This is your preference. This is the design. This is the process. Because the thing is, honestly, like I can think something is ugly and you can think it's beautiful, or vice versa. What I'm trying to push onto you as designers is make deliberate, educated decisions on how to use color. Okay? You'll get to a point where things come naturally and you're not thinking in terms of color schemes and how to do this and how to figure things out in the most academic way. It'll become more of a natural instinct, but that requires time and practice. Okay? In this last dress, I am putting the darkest values on the top and putting the lightest colors on the bottom. And when I'm done painting this one, pay attention to how it changes the proportions or perceived proportions of the dress. Because dark colors tend to make things look smaller and light colors tend to make things look bigger. And so when you have these extreme value changes, it is going to change what the proportions kind of look like. You know, where the points of emphasis are, the overall effect. Okay, let me know in the comments what you like, what you think. You know, is this a desired effect? This set of three dresses, I wanted to talk about complementary color schemes more in depth because I want to talk about how we use the complements to create more neutral tones and how certain neutrals go with other neutrals because of the undertone of the color. Okay. When we discuss complementary colors, some people just assume, oh, yellow and purple, and we use the bright colors, and you look at that, and usually, you know, they don't look great, okay, in their purest saturated form, okay? And so you might be thinking, well, I'm not going to use that, Zoe, because it's too bright, it's too different, and I don't really get how they harmonize, and yellow and purple, does anybody really wear that? I get that response a lot, and I get it. I don't particularly like yellow and purple in their purely saturated form much either. Not together anyway. Like, I like and wear a lot of yellow, actually. You're like, Zoe, you wear something other than black? I do when I'm not teaching. In this second dress, I have a yellow, but I have muted it with some of the violet. So you're getting a softer yellow. It's definitely distinctly yellow, but it's creamier. It's more neutral. Okay, it's a little bit more sophisticated. Okay, it's going toward the light, warm, creamy, neutral territory. Okay, in leather speak, we would call this kind of like a blondie, cashmere, chamois sort of color. Okay. So you see how those two yellows are very different. Okay, now I'm applying that bright purple to the design of that first dress. And you see those two colors and it's like, it's very bright and complements, yeah, they really push the other color. They make the other color pop. And I mean, this is why redheads look so great in green. Okay, let's think about this for a second. Yes. So, yeah, but then here, I took the purple and I muted it down with quite a bit of yellow. And you see how the colors are more neutral, but because they're both comprised of the same two colors, just in different quantities, you're still getting a harmonized look. Like the colors go together because they're essentially the same color. It's a mixture of purple and yellow in different ratios. They're both the same. Okay. And then in this third dress, I'm playing and pushing the complements more. Yeah, and these are all complements. These are, all three of these are complementary color schemes. Okay. Complementary color schemes are not always just like bright red and bright green, bright orange and bright blue. Okay. I hope you all watched my video on muting and neutrals and how to mix neutrals with paint colors. Okay. That's in the color lessons playlist. And this is the best way to figure out neutrals, is to use complements of the colors that already exist in your color palette. And, you know, you can do a thing where when you're picking out fabrics, you can, you know, maybe you decide you want yellow and purple in your collection and you want a neutral that goes with both. Maybe you mix up a few paint swatches of yellow and purple, the yellow you want and the purple you want, and then you'll get some different gradations of the neutrals that you want, and then you can take those to your fabric sales rep and be like, these are the neutrals I'm looking for because I think these are going to harmonize well with the pop colors that I've already selected. Okay. So these are just a few lessons on practical applications of color theory and fashion design. Please hit the like button, the thumbs up button, if you want me to continue this series, if you found this video helpful for your design purposes. Share, subscribe, comment. Let me know which ones were your favorite iterations of these dresses. Ask me all your color theory questions, and I will see you in the next video. Hey, party people. In this video, I want to talk about color theory as it applies to working with markers. My previous color theory videos, they were deep dives into terminology and color mixing and working with paint, but I know that many of us work with marker a huge chunk of the time, if not a majority of the time, and I wanted to take those same concepts and show how they can or cannot be applied to working with markers. First up, when you are working with markers, you can layer them to create new shades. You don't want to layer a lot. It's not like paint and watercolor or oils where you can layer a whole lot. There's only so much layering you can do with marker, but you can layer a little bit. Make sure that the paper you are using can take that much ink though. Right? There's a lot of different kinds of papers you can use for ink. Today I'm demoing on simple cardstock. It's pretty inexpensive, just whatever stuff at the office supply store. Okay, they take marker pretty well. I like to use marker paper. I don't really love Bristol for marker work. Okay, this is not going to be the most beautiful marker rendering video you've ever seen in your life. That's really not the point of this video today. So just roll with my messy cones here. It's a funny sentence I never thought I'd say. Just roll with my messy cones here. Can you tell the difference between the green by itself and the green layered on top? It's a little bit darker and cooler. Okay, so if you wanted to just make a real subtle change to the color without having to run out and get a new marker, you can layer. Now, the order in which you layer your markers also makes a difference. Do you see how this one is slightly darker than this one? It's because of the way it's layered. I'm going to show you a more drastic example. Okay, so this is Prismacolor Yellow Ochre, and this is Prismacolor Dark Purple. I lied, I don't want this one. I want this one, Prismacolor Violet. Now, if you put the yellow ochre on top of the purple, it look like this. And as you know, if you watch my previous color theory videos, then you know that when you mix two opposites on the color wheel together, you're mixing complementary colors together, which creates a mute, a much more neutral color. Okay, I've muted that purple down so that it's looking more brownish. Okay, putting that violet on top of the yellow ochre. Here's the purple by itself. The yellow, because it's such a light color, it affects the purple less. It still mutes it a little bit. It does warm up the purple. You see that? So this is the violet by itself. This is violet on top of yellow ochre. And this is yellow ochre on top of violet. Okay? And you see this muting effect going on by layering them in a specific order. So another big thing that we discussed in the color theory videos was the 4 ways to desaturate a color: tinting, shading, toning, and muting. Now, tinting with paint was color plus white or color plus water to make it lighter. With marker, you can't do that much. Okay, you can use a colorless blender. Some of them are, not that great. I'm not a huge fan. So you do actually have to go get a lighter color. Shading is when you add black to a color to make it darker. And again, you can't really do that with marker because if you add black, it's just gonna look mostly black. This Prismacolor black, they have 2 blacks, jet black and black. This is black, and this is one of the weakest black markers that I've ever used. It's the weakest black, and it still will cover it. So no matter how light of a touch you use with black, it's gonna be black. So you can't really mix black with markers. You are gonna have to get a darker marker color. With tones is color plus gray. And in this area, you actually do have some wiggle room. So when you're layering grays with marker colors, you have to consider a few different things. Number 1, the value. Value in color theory means the lightness or darkness of a color. And so when you look at these gray markers from any brand, Copic, they name theirs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Prismacolors, they call them 10%, 30%, 70%. But, all these brands, they have that scale, okay, the value scale for their grays. I did this gray scale using the Copic Neutral Gray series. And so they have from 0 to 9, and then this is the Copic Black. I know they have a neutral gray 10, but mine dried out and I need to get a new one. But now that I've made this grayscale, I'm kind of wondering if I really do need one, because the Copic Black isn't that strong. Copic has a special black, their 110. Their black is color number 100. Their special black is 110, and that one is a more intense black. So when you're layering, consider your value that you're adding, okay? If you use a dark 6 or 7 on top of this light yellow, what is going to happen compared to if you did an actual value match, which is closer to 2? You may be at this point thinking, how do you tell it's a value match? Okay, what you want to do is make yourself a value scale like this and bring your marker all the way to the edge so you can do it edge to edge, and put your value scale right on top of the color. Squint your eyes so everything becomes real blurry. And there's going to be a point on this scale where you don't really see a line of difference because the value is similar enough, they start blurring together. These two are never going to blur together because this is too dark. Okay, the difference is always going to be distinct. But here, okay, do you see how it starts blurring because it's a similar color, because it's a similar value? Okay, and so your value match is in here. The next thing you want to think about is the color of the gray. There's a lot of gray scales out there. Many brands have several gray scales. This, I swatched the middle gray, either the 5 or the 50%, in 6 different gray stories, okay? This is currently my favorite series right now. This is the Touch Blue Gray, BG. This is BG5, this one. Look at the shade differences. This warm gray is really green. Some people will call it a French gray. And it's this gray family that I would more often pair with yellows and greens because they share an undertone. This Prismacolor Warm series, it has a purplish undertone. So this would pair great with purples, red violets, pinks, reds, even oranges. Yeah, I would put that because I think this is too green to go with orange. And then these are very cool. Okay. Now, do you see the value difference between these two? Brand to brand, the values are going to be a little bit different. So you need to make your own value scales for the grays that you use. Okay. So this is a Copic C5, Cool Gray 5. This is a Prisma Cool Gray 50%. And these definitely run cool. Obviously not as blue as the Touch. And then this is the Copic Neutral Grays, and it is the most neutral out of the grays that I currently own. The one that has the least, distinguishing undertone. And these are great for all kinds of blues, also some of the cooler purples, blue greens, okay? That's what these are for. So when you are thinking to put a gray on top of a color, think about the value you want and think about the undertone you want. If I want to create a tone of a yellow, I have a warm 0, 1, 2 here. Okay. Remember the 2 was pretty close, so I'm going to start there. So yeah, layering them together will produce a darker color, but it's still light enough that you really see the yellow still. This is a W0. You can tell the difference between these two. This one is a little bit toned down, but because this color is so light, it's not creating as much of an impact on the yellow. Right? The last is mutes, and we went over that with this here, layering the yellows and the purples together. We could try it with some other colors too. I pulled a few different greens to test out. Red typically will run like a 5, 6. It actually wants to be in between there, right? The grass green is closer to the 5 than the 6. This one, which is Concept in Geranium, is a touch darker value. let's try putting this green on and seeing what happens. So you're getting this really awesome burgundy color, actually. I like that. But that is a really great burgundy color. And now, if you're mixing paints, you know how to make burgundy, red and green. By the way, this Concept brand, okay, this is a nice cheap brand that I bought. I bought 2 of these at Jerry's Artorama in New York last time I was there, and I'm actually enjoying these quite a bit. Sometimes I find that they start kind of like getting a tiny bit grainy, and I just like to go back in and put in another layer, and it kind of tends to blend things out. When you're muting a color that's not like pure saturated color, but something that's already toned down a little bit, you want to take that into consideration, because think about if you put this dark, bright red on this dull green, that's going to pack like a huge punch. You're like almost obliterating that green, right? So if you want to mute a pea green like this is the Copic Chow and Pew Green. Pea green, not pew green. Puke green, no, pea green. I would go for a toned down red, like this is the Copic Rose Salmon. This is the Prismacolor Peach. This is what it looks like by itself. It's a tint of a red, basically, is what it is. That's what peaches are. They're red plus white, like a warm red plus white. So you're still seeing more of that green in there. That peach is really powerful, though. Bring that in again. See, it doesn't touch the red so much, but it does blend in with that peach better. See, this one is a softer color to begin with. So what's the practical application to learning all this layering? For me, the big practical application is choosing shading colors for my illustrations. We have 3 main options for choosing shadow colors. A few weeks ago, I posted a video on shadow placement, where to put your shadows so that your garments look 3D. And now we're going to talk about what colors to use so that your garments look 3D, look interesting, etc. Number 1, you can shadow your garments with gray. In my own work, I choose to shadow with gray when I want to tone down the color, or I'm using a neutral, okay, where I want it to look more toned down, more chilled out. This Prismacolor Orange, what value is it? I would say it's like hovering between a 3 and a 4. And so that's the color I want. This is a natural 3. So if I want to shadow it, and that's my light source, I will put my shadow over here. And if I want to blend it out more, I would take that same color again and I would layer it up. And I would let the edges bleed some of that orange to kind of blend things out. And then I get the shadow. I personally think that when you have a color as vibrant as orange, the gray really dulls things out. And shading with gray is a better option for things like that are duller, like this green is kind of dull. This goldenrod is kind of dull. Even this blue would take a cool gray quite nicely. Something like this. Here's a warm gray 5. And then, again, I would take that original green and blend it out. And you get that nice shadow. And the gray shadow works much better on a dull green than it does on the orange, in my opinion. When you have bright colors like the yellow and the orange, I personally like to go with option number 2, which is a darker, more intense version of the base color. So when you have Prismacolor Orange, I would shadow with a darker orange. This is Winsor Newton Pro Marker in bright orange. And that works as a shadow color better for me than that. Sometimes I'll go in again and put in a darker shadow in between. And you can use yet an even darker color or another layer, and it kind of gives it another dimension. All those good things. this beautiful bright green, that's Prismacolor Grass Green. This is Prismacolor in Emerald. And again, this one has a really beautiful, vibrant kind of thing going on. Dun, 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 dun. So here's the thing I want to show you. So this is Prismacolor Violet, and this is Prismacolor Dark Purple. And this color, it is a redder purple. On the same conversation track as choosing the shadow colors to change their overall mood, if you wanted to warm up an illustration, you could choose a warmer shadow color to help that look, like this dark purple. On the other hand, you can choose another purple. This is Imperial Violet, which is a much cooler purple, bluer, and you can shadow with that, and that gives a different vibe. So even if your fabric base color, if this is your swatch color, and you've got that color going on, you can still kind of alter the mood and the general feel for the color by changing your shadow color. This is how I like to shadow skin tones, with a darker, more intense color. I absolutely never shadow skin tones with gray. It always looks terrible unless I'm doing like a super stylized thing where I have a really weird skin color. If I'm going for a natural skin color, then I'm never shading with gray. I'm always shading with a darker version of the base skin color. This base color is the Prismacolor Light Tan. If you're using this as just a coat color, just like a, rosy camel cashmere coat, sure, you can shadow that with gray if that's the look you're going for. Here's a warm gray 5. I would not want that shadow color on skin. This is not the kind of thing where, watercolorists who do these portraits, they do these really stunning skin tones with like blue shadows and, they can really manipulate skin in beautiful ways. But when I'm talking about like fast marker design sketches, I'm not trying to go for like multifaceted, beautiful, catching the light skin. I can have fun with that in watercolor, but for design sketches, I just want enough marker work so that things look 3D. The third option is to use your complement to create a muted shadow. And you can do that if you want a more dimensional look to your garments, to your shadows. So this is the Copic Pale Grayish Blue with the shadow of the Copic Light Crockery Blue. Okay, B91 and B93. Okay. And so, again, when I want to really punch out the color and make the blue prominent, just using a darker, more intense shade for the shadow. Now here in this one, if you want a little bit more depth and create muted shadows, which in all honesty is a little bit more realistic, then I layered the RO2 Rose Salmon, which is a tint of orange. Okay, it's like a reddish orange, and it's a tint. That's the color by itself right there. So I layered some on top of the pale grayish blue, and then I went in with a layer of the light crockery blue. So it's still blue, but it's a little bit duller. It's less bright, but I think that it looks more interesting and it has more depth to have those mute undertones in the shadow. This is Prismacolor Goldenrod, and this is a warm gray 40. And again, you're bringing some of that soft muting into the shadow. And then if I take the goldenrod again and layer it some more, I'm like warming it up and kind of blending it back in with the rest. So using the complement, finding the right color can really add some depth and dimension to your shadow work. All right, I hope this video was helpful. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today. Leave your questions in the comments section below. Share, subscribe, all those ways you show me love. And I will see you in the next video.
Hey party people! In this video, I'm going to discuss choosing a color story for your fashion collection. Specifically, I'm going to 1. Go over several methods to develop your color story, 2. List factors you have to consider when developing your color story, and 3. Answer the number one question people ask me about color stories. First up, methods to develop color stories. In the industry, large to medium-sized companies often use trend forecasting, color forecasting services to help them. Most smaller businesses can't afford or don't want to use these services. Okay? One method is to pull colors from an image or a couple of images. These images can be from your sketchbook development or your mood board. I would only pick like a couple of images at most. Otherwise, you just get too many colors a lot of the time. One method I like is to choose a work of art that your customer would enjoy. Remember, all design decisions go back to your customer, your muse, and your brand. Listen, if Raf Simone can get fired from Calvin Klein for not designing for the customer, so can you. Anyway, this work of art can be a painting, a photograph, a sculpture, or even a building. Pull colors from this painting to create your color story. If you watch the colors and textures video from my fashion design process series, then you know that I was inspired by extraordinary chickens, and that whole thing has become this long-running inside joke between me and long-time viewers of my channel. And there was this amazing photo of different colored chicken eggs in the Extraordinary Chickens book, and that was the inspiration for my color story. And then, sometimes you'll have to take an image and round things out by adding an extra neutral or adding an extra pop color, but you can start from that work of art. The piece of art has to relate to your customer. It should be something that your customer would enjoy looking at, would enjoy having a print of in their home, or maybe even the original, something like that. Okay, it all has to relate. In this example, let's pretend my customer is in her 30s and 40s. She lives in a big city. She wants an urban uniform without relying on too much black. She likes to look polished without thinking too hard about it every morning. Everything should go with everything else. And she travels a lot for work, so she likes the core of her wardrobe to all coordinate with each other for fast and easy packing. I chose the Mona Lisa as my color inspiration. It's dark, it's moody, it's subtle, it's a little mysterious, and it looks like there can be a lot of different but cohesive, harmonious color stories. There's a lot of greens, a lot of browns and oranges, golds, and some lighter blues in the background. Color stories should have a balance of colors and neutrals. Colors should tell the story of the mood of the collection, and then the neutrals sell. Let's be real. The neutrals will most often sell the higher quantities. Okay? Color stories should have a balance of light, medium, and dark colors. I say the word balance because creating a color story is not math. Okay? There's no one formula that suits everyone. You have to think about whether or not your customer wears a lot of color, whether they wear a lot of dark colors, or maybe your customer loves pastel colors. Maybe they love acidic tones. Again, back to what your customer wants. Another method is to visit your fabric sources and look through their prints. And you may come across a print that is perfect for your collection's direction that season. And you can pull colors from the print to create your color story. Design companies do this all the time. Pull colors from a print or recolor a print to match their color story so that everything works together. And honestly, you don't even have to use the print. You can just use it solely as color inspiration, because I like the colors of this print, but I don't love the print. Another method is to start with a color that you're really feeling and you think will be hot in the near future, and start playing with color schemes. Okay, I have a whole color lessons playlist where I go over what complementary, split complementary, monochromatic, analogous, and triad color schemes are. And remember, these color schemes are not limited to bright red and bright green as the complement. And, the red and the green complementary color scheme can actually be a rich, deep burgundy and a soft grayish green, rounded out with a winter white and a charcoal gray. Okay? And it's not about the raw color on the color wheel. And some students think that these kind of standard color schemes are too basic to be used in high fashion, but they could not be more wrong. I screen grabbed these from Vogue.com. This is the Spring 2019 Couture collection from Zuhair Murad. Apologies if I pronounced that terribly. And this collection uses a beautiful analogous color scheme, which analogous means neighboring colors on the color wheel. And we have a blue, green, blue, blue, violet, violet, red, violet color scheme. And some of the colors are the pastel version. Some of them are the really bright, saturated versions of the color, but it is an analogous color scheme. Here's Giambattista Valli, and Valli uses another analogous color scheme. A lot of black, a lot of white for sure, but then also a lot of red and a lot of red violet, which translates to these beautiful bright pinks. Here's Zero Plus Maria Corneo, and this collection showcases a complementary color scheme with a soft blue and some bright oranges and some neutral tones like white and camel. This is Marnie, and Marnie, this collection has a lot of colors, but the main colors are your primary triad: red, yellow, and blue. And, there in the prints, there are little bits of other colors, but the dominant colors are red, yellow, blue, and tons of white. Here's Dries Van Noten, Spring 2019 ready to wear, and this beautiful analogous color scheme is yellow, green, blue, orange, and then rounded out with a lot of white and a lot of black. And in this case, he's using the really rich, raw, saturated versions of these colors, but also with some bits of navy, okay, an extra neutral, some olive green, okay, but it's a very bright, colorful spring collection. And here's Isabel Marant, who is using a complementary color scheme in a very muted, soft, subtle way. You've got red, orange, and blue, green. And the blue, green has been muted a lot, and it has a lot, it's barely a tinted blue, and then a lot of muted red, orange, melony tones with white and black, and the metallic version of red orange to round it out. So yeah, a lot of big time designers showing at the main fashion weeks are using these academic color schemes as a jump point for them. And so, hey, if it's good enough for them, it should be good enough for you too. Another method is to check out websites that put together color stories like designedseeds.com. And there are actually a lot of websites that do similar things. And these websites, they're not built for one particular industry. You could take these color stories and apply them to home decor, apply them to an illustration, apply them to a fashion collection. And a lot of these also follow many of the kind of standard complementary, analogous, split comp, triad kind of color stories. Here's an analogous color story with blue, greens, and blues and violets. Here is a complementary color scheme using very muted gold and violet, yellow and purple, but muted. Here's another complementary story, red and green, but now it's pink and like duller sager greens and some neutrals. Okay, and so forth and so forth. Now let's talk about some of the factors to consider when putting together your color story. Number one, as always, what your customer wears. This is always the number one factor. What's daring and bold for one kind of customer can be quite boring for another. Uncle Carl would never do a Chanel collection without some black and white, without a little black dress, without some tweed. Valentino has long been known for Valentino red. And so even now, when Valentino is no longer there, it's so part of the heritage that every designer who works at Valentino remembers to include the Valentino red. Even if your company doesn't have a specific signature color, always think about what your customer expects from you, your brand. Number two, what season are you designing for? Okay, you want something fresh for spring, something rich and warm looking for fall, something chic and nautical for a resort, things like that. And yeah, I highly encourage you to look at the collections of designers you admire, designers who kind of have a similar style as you, and see how they approach color stories. 3, another factor you have to consider is what item category you're designing, especially now where a lot of these single item category companies are really flourishing. Okay. And, do you wear the same colors lingerie as you do parkas? Okay. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap, but for the most part, they run different color stories. Orange is definitely one of those colors where you have to kind of be careful about the placement. Number 4, another factor is in the industry, you must offer every style in multiple colors. It is a complete waste of money spent on developing the sample and perfecting the fit to offer something in one color and lose out on all the potential sales from people who might just not love that specific color that you offer it in. Okay. Even wedding gowns come in different shades of white. Okay. The only exception, I think, is black. Like black is such a big seller, you can get away with offering just black in a style. And you may think, Zoe, I go to Nordstrom and I see lots of stuff selling in one color. Yeah, just because a designer offers 3 colors doesn't mean that the store is going to order all the colors. Like Nordstrom may order the pink one that you sell, and then a different boutique might order the blue version of that style. Number 4, use a bit of color psychology to convey your mood and message. You do not need to overthink this. Okay? Bright yellows convey sunshine and happiness, and pale lilac is pretty and light and soft, and using a lot of dull grays and browns can showcase a rather somber mood. So when you're putting your color stories together, think about the mood you're trying to convey and what colors help illustrate that mood. Number 6, and this is going to be the most important one in terms of fashion business, is you will often choose colors and fabrics at the same time simply because of sourcing logistics. You will sometimes be limited by what's available at your price point and whether or not you can hit the minimums of the fabric wholesaler. If you can meet the minimums and you have the time to do it, you can get a fabric custom dyed. Okay? Anyways, always keep in mind that colors will look a little bit different depending on the texture as well. Okay? So merging all these factors together, using the Mona Lisa sample from earlier, we've got our customer, we've got our season, which is fall. We're doing blouses and pants and coats. Okay. I want to pick a couple of blouse fabrics, a couple of pant fabrics, and maybe one coating, or maybe 2. I have my approximate color story that I want here. And you can, tape these chips onto a piece of paper and take them to your fabric person. And you start looking for your fabrics and you see what's available, because I don't know about you, but it's so much easier and cheaper to go with what's available in stock before you start asking for dye to match things. So you start looking at what's available, what's cool, what basically follows the color story you have laid out, and you just start building your fabric stories with your color story. And some of the colors might change a little bit, and you might find out that you like the new color story better. Now let's answer the most frequently asked question about color. How many colors should be in one collection? In the industry, in business, and this is important because fashion is the intersection of creativity and commerce, the number of colors you have in a collection is all about the fabrics you have in a collection, which is dictated by the size of your company, the size of your collection, and what order minimums you can fulfill. You can learn more about fabrics in the fabrics playlist, which I'll link in the description box. And I already know that there's so many of you watching right now who hate this answer. You want me to tell you a number. Only have 6 colors for every collection, everybody. Yeah, that's not how things work. Okay? There's so many different kinds of fashion companies out there. And even for all, let's pretend 100% of you watching this video are doing startups. There's so many different kinds of startups. Okay? So you do have to consider, what are the minimums of the places that I'm sourcing? How many items, categories? Like, am I doing just bras? Or am I doing hoodies and jackets and parkas? Or am I you have to think about all these factors that I just listed. Sourcing is a headache. It's a big deal. And minimums, especially for startups, is a huge deal. Why do you think I was so excited to introduce y'all to Swatch On? And, I kept talking up really excitedly about how Swatch On has no minimums, and it's rare. There are a ton of companies out there that will do 100-yard minimum, 1,000-yard minimum. Some people, they'll say your minimum is 1 piece. And by 1 piece, they don't mean 1 yard. They mean 1 roll. And it can be anywhere from 50 to 100 yards in that roll. So you have to ask them how many yards are in a piece. And you might think, Zoe, am I going to look amateur and small if I have a narrow color story? No. Okay? Even well-known big labels will showcase a narrow color story because it looks good, it looks cohesive, and it really communicates their aesthetic message that season. This Hermes collection has a great complementary color scheme using orange and blue, but not raw orange and blue, but definitely more subtle and sophisticated versions of those colors, which is very much their brand. Okay, and they've got these little hits of red and green, which is another complementary pair. And this McQueen collection using a primary triad with red, yellow, and blue. And you see some bits of other collections in the prints and embroideries, but red, yellow, blue with black, white, and gray, that's their color story. And let's be real, McQueen and Hermes are huge brands. But they chose these focused color stories, so if they can make it look good, so can you. And that's it for today on color stories and how to put them together. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today. Share, subscribe, drop your questions in the comments section. Check the description box to links to all my shenanigans, links to videos related to this one. And you may think that putting together color stories is difficult with all the factors involved, but unless you're new to my channel, you know what I'm going to say. Hashtag always be practicing. Hashtag practice, not magic, because we are made of practice, not magic. And hashtag if your first one sucks, you're right on track. What does that hashtag mean? It means a lot of people are so afraid to do something that they never get around to doing even the first one. So if you try it, if you do the first one, you're on track. You've gotten started. Have fun practicing putting together color stories. Go look up some runway shows and lookbooks of your favorite designers and analyze their color stories. And I'll see you in the next video.
If you're playing a drinking game where you drink every time I say undertone, don't do that because you'll end up in the hospital. Hey, party people. Today we are talking a little bit more color theory. What are undertones and how can we use them? Why do we care? All those good things. All right. This is another color theory for fashion application video. And if you have any more questions about color, drop them in the comments below. Okay. First of all, what is undertone? Undertone is basically when you look at a color and you can tell if a color is brown or red or orange. Undertone is what kind of orange, what kind of brown, what kind of red. These are color swatches that I keep on me at all times, and these are just straight out of the tube colors that I have. And you're like, wow, you have a lot of reds and browns. And it's like, yeah, because I just do a lot of product testing. But yeah, so when you look at a red, for example, okay, maybe not this one, but these can all be classified as red. You're looking at a bunch of colors. These are reds. But you also have these warm toned reds up here. They lean a little bit more on the orange. Okay, where's my color wheel? When you look at the color wheel, these orangier, warmer colors veer red, orange. And this middle row is closest to true red, neutral, true red, in particular in here. Not so much here. This is starting to get a little bit dark. And then in here, we have cooler tone reds that are not quite red violet, but tipping red violet. These two are in red violet territory. These are more cool tone reds. And anyone who's shopped for a red lipstick knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? And this I put kind of separately because it's so dark. It's more burgundy territory. This is alizarin crimson, but it's not quite red. It's a shade of red, okay? So these are all undertones. Now, again, if you look at these colors, you can all be like, yeah, those are browns. Okay, individually, you can just say, yeah, those are browns. These over here tip orange. They're orangey browns. They're called burnt siennas, and burnt siennas are orangey browns, earthy, kind of rich soil, reminiscent clay, red clay sort of colors. And then we have these colors that tip more red, more rich red browns, and these are probably the closest to what just your average person will call brown. And these in here, this one tips yellow and this one tips green. You see the green undertone in here and the yellow undertone in here. Okay. Quick side note, I have all my lights on and I have the shades to the window open, and this is how you should also be doing your color work. If you're doing anything involving colors that requires accuracy, you want to be doing it in the early afternoon when the sun is high, it's super bright, your windows are open, so you're letting all that light in, or all your light bulbs are clean and white. Okay, most of us like a moody golden light bulb with a, on our table side lamp in the living room for everyday life. But for color work, you want white light bulbs, daylight light bulbs, actual daylight outside, like that. So anyway, all these browns have different undertones, and that's how you know, oh, this would go well with a brown. What kind of brown? And we're going to talk about that more in depth today. So that's undertone. That's kind of the undertone is like, what is the undercurrent of the color? What is the family it belongs to? This is a brown that belongs in the orange family, okay? Orange undertone. So what is the difference between a tone and an undertone? Okay, so rewind a tiny bit. There are 4 different ways to desaturate a color. And when you say the word desaturate, I mean make it less punchy and vibrant and bright. So if you want to take a bright red and you want to soften it, darken it, lighten it, these are all desaturation methods to get a slightly not quite so bright red. People use these terms like loosey-goosey in the real world, but in terms of color theory, these 4 words have very specific meanings. A tint of a color is color plus white. Shade is color plus black. Tone is color plus gray. And mute is color plus complement. Okay, so when you have any color on the color wheel, the direct opposite on the color wheel is its complement. And when you mix 2 complements together, you get a very different sort of desaturation that is really beautiful and can harmonize back and forth with each other. Here are some color swatches I created with gouache out of red and green. Okay, first you'll see this is green plus white, just a pure tint, gets a really cute mint color. And then here is red plus black. You get this really nice burgundy color. Okay, you can actually get like really nice burgundies by adding red and black or red and green. Okay, they provide different results. You should try it out yourself. Okay, red plus gray. Okay, here's one where it's red plus gray. It reads really gray, but it definitely has these very pink undertones, right? Red undertones. And it starts looking a tiny bit purpley because of the pinkness in there, okay? Same as this. This is a lot of white, a little bit of red, and a tiny bit of black. But you see how red, white, and black all go in there? Also here, this is a lot less gray than the others. These are very neutral. This one is more pink, but this is also toned red, some white, a little bit of black, but still a lot more red than these 3. When you are choosing a gray to mix with your colors, it's important that you stick to the correct gray in order to not change its undertone. So when you have 3 kinds of grays, generally speaking. We have cool grays, we have warm grays, and we have French grays. Now, red and orange colors get a warm gray, and blues and purples get a cool gray, and yellows and greens get a French gray because French grays have kind of a yellowy, greeny undertone. These are color pencils, but to demonstrate. Do you see how cool these are and how these tip more warm, like there's a little bit of red in there? And these have a more yellowy, greenish undertone. These are French grays. Okay, can you see the difference between the 3? Now, I want you to keep this in mind because labels mean nothing. Art supply companies label things ridiculously, okay? So these are Prisma, Neo Pico, and Copic cool grays, and they're all fairly similar to each other, so the cool gray is fairly standard. However, this is the Prismacolor warm gray, which tips a little bit purpley, a little bit red. Here is the Copic warm gray, which tips yellow green, which is like the Prismacolor French gray color pencil. So listen, learn your colors, but don't get too wrapped up in these labels, okay? This just, regardless of label, this is a warm gray, this is a cool gray, this is a green toned gray, this is a red toned gray, etc., etc. Okay, so always think of it in those terms and not necessarily what's on the label. But with yellow, you definitely want that yellow toned green, greeny gray, okay? This is Copic's Warm Gray 3, and here's it by itself. And do you see how yellow that tips? And so when you layer the yellow, that's really dark. Let's try a lighter one. because yellow is already a light color. This is that yellow, toned yellow, gray. Do you see how these work together? It doesn't fight the base of the yellow. It just makes it a little bit darker, but not black. Whereas if you added a cool gray, okay, whoa, that's way too dark. That'll overpower the yellow. So even if you have this really light, cool gray in here, you see how different those colors are? If you put this in here, you will start changing the undertone. You see how it's now starting to look a little bit green because you're making the yellow cooler. So it's tipping towards blue. Orange is the warmest color and blue is the coolest color. And so anytime you're like tipping blue towards blue, you're getting cooler, and then the reverse. So you see how these grays, they're so similar to each other in value, but this is changing it to a gray undertone where this is keeping the yellow and then just adding the gray. And you see how that harmonizes better. I mean, ultimately, if you want a greener yellow, then yeah, you can mix these colors together. That's the whole point of color theory is, not like a restrictive set of rules that force you to do things in a certain way, but to give you like information on how color works so that you can make decisions and not just trial and error. This is violet. And so let's add this cool 4. And you see how that harmonizes really well. This one is pretty warm. And when we look at it, it does tip purple, but it really tips red. Okay, and it's very obvious when we put it next to something that is truly purple. So when you layer it together, you see how you're warming up that violet significantly, right? So that shares an undertone, and that tips it very red. So learn how these grays work. So when you're making your tones, you can decide, I want to keep my original undertone of my color and just tone it down, or I want to change it radically. But honestly, if you're trying to stick to a specific color story, like if you are trying to stick to yellow and purple as a complementary color story, you don't want to start adding greens and reds to that. You're starting to go in too many different directions. And so you want to stick to the grays that work for the yellow and work for the purple. So how are we applying this knowledge to fashion? Okay, number 1, let's say you're putting together an outfit. Let's say you have this red and you want to work in some warm neutrals. Okay, so you can go in here because these are more orange, but they have enough red in them. Like, can you imagine throwing a beautiful leather blazer in this color on top of a red sweater? These browns also work because their base is this red. And so these all work together because they share an undertone. This works because this is green, okay? This is like bordering deep olive. And since green is its red complement, they don't share an undertone, but they're complements and they complement each other. That's where that word comes from. And yes, it's spelled with an E and not an I. Compliment with an I is when you say nice things about someone. Compliment with an E is when things go well together, okay? Compliment. This is the least pleasing pair because this has a yellow-green undertone, which is not a great complement for red, nor does it share an undertone with red. And so these fight each other. They do not work. These can work kind of depending on the texture. It will really depend on the texture, okay? But these will definitely give like a more 70s vibe. Can you see these like golden corduroy flared trousers with a red turtleneck? Very 70s. It works, but it definitely gives a retro vibe for sure. Complements in an outfit are really noticeable in menswear. Menswear uses this a lot. When you see a man in a blue suit, and it doesn't even have to be this bright. It could be a slightly darker, often is. you will see them in a brown belt and shoes. And you're going to see them in these beautiful burnt sienna colors because it's orange, okay? These colors are orange based, especially this one is very orange based, and blue and orange are complements and they work well together because they're complements. And then the orange is a neutral. It's turned into a neutral. And so it's not like bright blue and bright orange, pop, pop, but they're complements. Now, when you have a blue that's tipping more violet, you get a little bit darker, or you get a little slightly more violet, maybe not this purple. The complement is more yellow, more golden. So when you're in this territory, you're gonna veer cooler, more yellow toned browns. This is a mood board that I did. This is a fashion project I did, and it was only a teaching demo. I did it really fast for a teaching demo, and I cannot even begin to tell you when and why I did it. Maybe for Patreon, maybe for a different YouTube video. But the brief that I gave myself and gave to my students was pick 2 time periods in 2 different countries, parts of the world, and use references from those time periods and countries to put together your inspiration for a fashion collection. And I chose France, Rococo, Baroque, and Ancient Egypt. And I didn't have my color story at the time. Don't look at this yet. And I just wanted to, I brought all these in together. And what do you notice first? The rich browns, right? They're very warm, orange toned in all this Egyptian art, all this ornate wood, warm wood, gold. And in this picture, I really like how the lighting makes all the gold look copper, really more warm tone. But even in this, where it's broad daylight, the gold is so warm, it's veering orange. So I like that, and that was very prominent, okay? And the second most prominent color was the blue. Okay, these deep cobalt, super saturated blues, and some of these pastels peeking out in here, bits of pastel in here, all these pastel blues in here. And then for some reason, I know this is just lighting, but it was such a punch. And there's blues in here. So I wanted this warm, sort of, but like really focus on this gold and the brown, because I didn't want one or the other, okay? Because they are so much the essence of these 2 time periods and countries. And so I played around and was like yellow and gold and these woods. Here's where understanding undertones comes in, because when you look at all the desaturated and saturated colors on a mood board like this, then you can understand the source of the color. When you understand these warm undertones here, 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 then you know that red-orange is the source color, the mother color, okay? That's the base. And we're talking like these, okay? These orangey but more redder toned. They're redder than this bright orange one. They're in here. You see how similar they are? These colors in here. And this gold, while it's not, bright yellow, it's more yellow-orange because it's gold, especially in here. And so when I started kind of analyzing the colors that I liked, I put together this split complementary color story. It's blue, so much blue, yellow-orange, all the gold, and red-orange, all the browns. And that became the basis of my color story, okay? All these golds, I put in a light baby gold, this in here, but also because I wanted to punctuate all this warmth. I really wanted all this like warm undertone family. I didn't want a lot of white and gray, like none of these like light chalky things, although that is kind of also reminiscent in Baroque. And I definitely wanted the blues, this blue and the Rococo blue. And these are just pop colors. You know, I think pink is very popular in Rococo. It's like, but it's definitely, these are pop colors. And this, I was always on the fence about it. And now that I look at it again, I really want to take that green out. I think the pink is really important in there though. But see, I could almost see myself tipping a little bit warmer so that it stays red-orange. And it continues to say sort of like varying levels of warm with the complement of the blue. And that's how I started developing a color story based off the inspiration images that I put together. So it's the knowledge of all the other color lessons that I've already posted. I'll put the link to the playlist in the description box below. Also, understanding undertones helps you figure out what the base colors are for all of these neutrals. Okay, all these color lessons are building blocks to a foundation of color knowledge to reduce your trial and error. You know, to reduce the time you spend making 100 color chips. And you know, a thing you could have done is to make color chips of all your favorite colors and kind of put them together and play around. But that takes a lot of time and effort, and we move fast in fashion. All right, that's all I can think of to say about undertones. Please heart this video if you learned something new today. Share, subscribe, drop me all your color questions in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new series on Fundamental Fridays. This series, we're going to go over how to illustrate black textures. It's really a matter of figuring out shades of black, just like you would figure out shades of red for illustrating a red texture, shades of blue for illustrating a blue texture. The only thing that makes it more difficult is the differences in the shades of black are so much more subtle than differences in shades of yellow or green, right? And yes, you can, and I do use dark grays as part of the shades of black, but you have to get really choosy about which dark grays you use because there's a line between charcoal gray and your darkest grays and light black. And you never want to cross that line. You want to stay firmly in the light black camp. And I'm going to show you more about that as I start pulling out my markers and showing you what these colors look like. But I want to preface all of that by saying I have deliberately overlit this video. Like you can tell, like there's so much light pouring all over my studio table right now. And I did that on purpose so that you can really see the differences in all the shades of black that I'm about to show you. Now, when you see these blacks in person, the differences are going to be more subtle and everything is going to be darker because this whole video is purposefully overexposed. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're shopping. It's like, oh, it didn't look like this in Zoe's video. It's like, no, everything is going to be darker. The differences are going to be more subtle. Right? But, you know, I was trying to accommodate all the different computer and phone and tablet screens out there that you guys are going to be watching this video on and really make sure that you guys can see the value and tone differences that I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to use these words a lot in this video series, value and tone. Okay? So value means the lightness or the darkness of a color. So when I say, look at all these values, it means look at how all these different colors, some are light and some are dark. Okay, you have all these lightnesses and darknesses of shades of black. And when I talk about tones, I mean undertones, okay? Just like any other color. I mean, you can have a green And you can have greens that have blue undertones, more bluish greens, not so blue so they look turquoise, but you've seen them, right? Cool greens, bluish greens. And then you have greens that have yellow undertones, warm greens, not quite full chartreuse, but the warmer greens. And just like that, blacks also have different undertones that I'm going to talk about. You ever go marker shopping and you see how, Copic has a warm gray, a natural gray, a cool gray? I think they have another one too. Like they have a bunch of different kinds of grays. Prismacolor has a warm gray, French gray, neutral gray, and cool gray that I can recall. So these all have these different gray undertones. And when we start hitting the black markers, the same is going to be true. The lighter the black is, the more of an undertone you're going to see. And then I'm going to show you some super black markers where there's no undertone. It's just black. Blackity black, black, black. So much black. Serious black. Wait, serious black. Isn't that a Harry Potter character? Anyway. So what I'm doing now is I'm laying down bars, test bars of the darkest grays I have in my marker kit. I have in the Prismacolor sets, I have a full set of warm grays and a full set of cool grays. So I made a bar for the warm gray. And in the Copics, I have Natural Gray 9 and I have a full cool gray series. And the Neo Pico 2s is a marker set that I bought in Japan that I still haven't gone around to testing. Yeah, I'm always testing stuff. And, nobody is telling me what order I need to test things in. So I just test whatever looks exciting to me at that point in time. And these, unfortunately, have been kind of pushed to the side, but I pulled them out for this demo, and I pulled the darkest gray that was in the set. So that's their Cool Gray 8. And I don't know if they have, a gray 9, 10, 11, whatever, but this is the darkest that was there. And when I look at it, the value of it is comparable to the warm gray 90. So I'm rolling with it. With the Copics, their darkest gray is the 10, but I don't have a natural gray 10. I have a cool gray 10, but look here. You can see as I'm laying down the color that the values of the natural gray 9 and the cool gray 10 are very similar. So I'm just rolling with it. I'm going to assume that if I had a natural gray 10, it would be slightly darker, and that might be even a little bit better. So I'm going to test out my blacks and grays on these main 4 bars, but I want to show you just a couple other really dark grays I have in my kit. This is the Prismacolor Cool Gray in 90. And I don't love this as a light black. It has such a cool undertone that it very much looks like charcoal gray to me. And so I'm not going to use it. The warm gray, because it's got that brownish purplish undertone, okay, it suits for warm light blacks. This is the Neo Pico 2 Neutral Gray 7. And, the value is a little bit lighter, but kind of like the Copic Natural 9 and the Cool 10, the difference is minimal. And you can see the undertone is definitely much more neutral. What I want you to pay attention to right now is how, not all 90% grays from one brand are the same in value. And not all the gray 9s and the gray 10s from another brand are the same value. You have to really look at each individual marker and test it out on its own. Now let's get started with our black markers. First up is the Prismacolor Black PB98. And I'm going to layer it on top of the Prismacolor Warm Gray 90 because that's how I'm going to use it. Anytime I'm testing media, I try to test it as closely to how I'm going to use it in my final illustrations as much as possible. And when I illustrate, let's say, a black blouse, okay, I will have a light black base fabric color, and I will use a dark black to do my shadows. And so let's pretend I use the Prismacolor Warm Gray 90 as my light black, and then I would use my Prismacolor Black PB98 as my dark black, my shadow color, and I would layer the shadows on top of the base color. And so I'm gonna test it by layering it on top. Prismacolor has a second black called Jet Black, which is their PB211, and it is darker and a slightly warmer tone than the PB98. And I'm going to layer it on top. You have a few options here. Because you have the two blacks, you could actually use the jet black as a second shadow. You know, if you watch my shading series, then you know that I like to have multiple values of shadow so that it looks more 3D, it has more depth and interest. So you could do that. You can use all three of these colors, these blacks, grays, to create different shadows, or you could just use the Prismacolor Black PB98 as your light black. Because out of all the markers labeled black in my marker kit, the Prismacolor PB98 is the lightest black. And so I often do use this as my light black. It, again, depends on the fabric that I want to render or whatever it is you want to render. You've been to the fabric store, you've seen black fabrics, and you know there are so many different values and tones of black fabrics. You know, when you look at black denim, it's much more faded looking because you see a bit of those white weft threads poking through. And, you know, black silks that have kind of a soft shine surface, those blacks tend to look much darker than black silks that have a matte surface like crepe. Crepe is not shiny, and so it looks more intense and dark and black, whereas charmeuse and satin, they have that glossy sheen on the surface and it looks lighter. So I'm showing you guys all these options so that you can match your fabric. Because sometimes it'll be black, but it'll look really close to the darkest gray you have in your kit. And sometimes it's so black that you have to use this light black as your base color instead. So here I have two Copic blacks. I have their Black 100 and I have their Special Black 110. And their Special Black, I don't know why that's so funny to me. Special Black, it's special. Their Special Black is a little bit darker than their regular black. Although I have found that the value difference is not as intense as the value difference between the two Prismacolor blacks, but there's still a distinct difference. So here I am layering the Black 100 on top of the Copics that I have out here. And you can see the value difference between the grays and the blacks, light black, dark black. And here I am layering the Special Black 110 on top. And now you are seeing this family of black colors. Now I'm layering the brands together right now just for organization's sake, but people who watch my channel know that I mix and combine and overlap brands in the same illustration constantly. Or you can just use the two Copic blacks as your light black and your dark black without the grays. Here's how it looks, just the two of them. Now I'm gonna bring out the big guns. This is Chart Pack Super Black, and it is super black. Look at that. Look at that. Prismacolor jet black. No contest. I mean, look at that. Whoo! Hi. Super black is super. Always make sure that you're looking at the color after your marker has dried. I love Charpak brand because they smell. They've got that awesome like marker stink, you know, but I'm kind of weird. I also love the smell of gas stations and cigars. Anyway, so this is Charpak Super Black. And, you know, I really love Charpaks. They perform super well, and they're not really on the expensive end for markers. I am going to be doing a marker roundup video as my next visual playlist on Whatever I Want Wednesday coming up in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. But in the meanwhile, yeah, go check out Charpaks. They are underrated, I think. So now I'm testing out a Sharpie. Sometimes I use a Sharpie because it's black and it's very black, as you can see. Again, just kind of making that jet black look not very jet at all. Now, I have quite a few markers. Of course, I don't have every marker under the sun, not every black marker, but this is the blackest marker I have ever seen. This is the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen Big Brush Pigment Marker in black 199. And it is black, y'all. Seriously black. Look at that. I mean, hold on a second. We have to let it dry first before we really see the color. But do you see how like all like the other blacks, like this whole row is, they're all labeled black, but they just look like wimpy little 50% grays in comparison to the Faber-Castell black. Look at that. Okay, see, now it's dry and you can really see how black it is. And that's the most intense black. Look at that. This is layered on top of the Copic Special Black. Sorry, Copic, your black is not all that special. And here's the Faber-Castell black compared to the Sharpie, and yeah, look at that. I mean, there you can see a bit of a tone difference, but yeah, that Faber-Castell, it's so black it has no tone. It's just black. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, Zoe, I'm not going to be using any of those dark grays. I'm just going to go with the blacks that you showed me, since you showed me several shades of black. All right, let me talk about the flip side of that for a second. Number one, remember this video is overexposed to show you more clearly the differences. So remember, these grays are going to look darker in person without crazy blasting studio lights, okay? Number two, using dark blacks or light blacks and the blacks and whatnot are fine if you don't need to put down a lot of design details and textures on top. But if you want to do that, you are going to want to use another black medium to draw and illustrate textures and design details on top. And so it's better to use these darkest grays so that when you use a black fine liner or black color pencil to put in these details, those details show up, you know, depending on the look that I'm going for. Okay, if I want to really blast out some design details, I will outline things in white. If I want a more subtle look, or for textures, I will use black on top of a super dark gray. I use fine liners from Copic, Staedtler, Prismacolor, and the Sakura Microns, which seem to be the industry standard, although I don't find them any better or worse than the other brands I mentioned. And then if you watch my first visual playlist, then you know that these Color Masters, I use them as fine liners. And you can use brush pens to put in textures and details, or draw patterns or prints on top of the dark grays. I use black fine liners to draw in design details like these pockets that I'm doing right now, and top stitching. Again, if I want the more subtle look. Sometimes I want everything to pop and be super clear, so I'll use a white instead. And I will demo that in a future video in this series. I'm going to go over a few of the black pencils that I use. If I want a fuzzy texture, I will take a black color pencil or charcoal pencil and illustrate those textures on a lighter black. Like this one is almost too dark for the fuzziness to show up. Again, it's really about matching your fabric and the look you're going for. Maybe you want something lighter like the Prismacolor Warm Gray 90 as your background to put soft mohair, boucle, cashmere textures on top with the charcoal pencil, like I'm showing you right now. Now, when you put the black charcoal pencil on top of the shadow color blacks, the darker blacks, yeah, they're not going to show up that much, but it's fine. Most details and textures show up less in shadow garments in general anyway. I mean, unless you have really light color garments, you know, even in a blue garment, you're going to see less detail, less texture, you know, in the armpits, under shadow areas, things like that. There are some varieties of values and tones in color pencils as well. But you know, with color pencils, values can be determined more by how hard you press. And if you use blenders like blender pencils, or the alcohol, rubbing alcohol, or baby oil, those tricks I went over in the shading with color pencils video. This is the Koh-i-Noor woodless pencil. I really like it. It's a very firm pencil and it makes for doing delicate details pretty nice. This is Prismacolor Black, and longtime viewers know how I feel about Prismacolors already. The colors are nice. They blend beautifully. Their leads are soft and snap even if you think about sharpening them. I have a few viewers who have been recommending the same color pencil sharpener to me, and they say it works like a dream on Prismacolor. So I'm about to get that because those Prismacolors are no joke. And then this is the Faber-Castell Polychromos in black, and you know, they are just a high quality color pencil in general. Now I'm just putting the little blender on these so you guys can see how that effect looks. The Koh-i-Noor is a lighter black. Okay? Again, really great for the detail work because it really keeps a point. The Prismacolor Black is quite black with a more bluish undertone, and because it's so creamy, it reacts to that blender really quickly. And then the Polychromos has a more neutral tone to it. So depending on what you're going for. I also like to use charcoal pencils for some detail works. I don't use full-on charcoal because, oh, the powder, it flies everywhere. Charcoal pencils are much cleaner and neater and not as much kick up. The Faber-Castell charcoal is the cleanest. The generals I have in several lead weights. See the difference between the 2B and the 6B. The 6B, of course, is softer and darker, just like with pencil leads. You know, the 6B is really soft and dark, and the 2B is still soft, but not as soft and dark as the 6B. So there you have it. Look at all of these markers and color pencils and charcoal pencil options for you to get started on illustrating your black textures. Look at this chart. Isn't it hilarious? Like that, those Prismacolor warm grays, 90%, they look so light in comparison to all the blacks that I showed you. And now that everything is dry, look at that bottom bar. You can really see how dark that Faber-Castell black is. Look at all those shades of black, right? As this series continues, I'm going to go over other media and then start doing some small sample illustrations of different textures you can create using the media I introduced in this series. But as a starter video, I hope this was helpful to help you figure out what markers and color pencils you should buy to get started on your black illustrations. If you found this video helpful, please hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't already so that you can get a notification for when I continue this series. Share this video with anyone who loves designing with and wearing as much black as I do. My students in class really freak out when I wear something that's not black. They're like, "What are you doing, Zoe? What's going on? I don't understand." Cracks me up every time. All right, you know the drill. Hashtag always be practicing. And I will see y'all in the next video.